On Tuesday the 21st of July, and so we begin this Future Melbourne Committee meeting. I welcome councillors, management and members of the public attending tonight's meeting, both in person and virtually. We are meeting on Wurundjeri Woiwurrung country, and I respectfully acknowledge the traditional owners of the land we govern, the Wurundjeri Woiwurrung and Boonwurrung peoples of the Kulin, and pay respect to their elders past and present. We acknowledge and honour the unbroken spiritual, cultural and political connection they have maintained to this unique place for more than 2,000 generations. This meeting is being streamed live, and the recording will be published on Council's website by close of business tomorrow. The unconfirmed minutes of this meeting will also be available from the Council's website as soon as practicable. I request that all mobile phones be turned off or to silent for the duration of the meeting. An apology has been received from the Deputy Lord Mayor, Rashina Campbell. I'm expecting to see other councillors hopefully very shortly. We move on to agenda item 2, disclosure of conflicts of interest. If any councillor has either a general or material conflict of interest as defined in the Local Government Act in relation to a matter to be considered by the committee, then please disclose the type and nature of your interest prior to consideration of the item. Agenda item 3, confirmation of the minutes of the previous meeting. I call on a councillor to move a motion adopting the minutes of open meeting number 32 held on the 7th of July 2026. Thank you, Councillor Routh. Do we have a second? Thank you, Councillor Camillo. I will now put the motion to the vote. All those in favour, please raise your hand. I declare that carried unanimously. We move to agenda item 4, matters arising from the minutes of the previous meeting. I ask councillors whether there are any matters arising from the minutes they wish to call out. No? Okay, we move on to submissions and correspondence. The following submissions have been received in accordance with Council's governance rules. In relation to agenda item 6.1, which is the Little Burke Street planning application, we have a request to speak from Paul Little, Planning and Property Partners. In relation to agenda item 6.2, Westgate Tunnel Impacts Update, we have requests to speak and items of correspondence. In terms of requests to speak, we have one from Sean Kilper, who will be joining us via Zoom, Tony Bailey, Dr. Kate Kennedy from the Kensington Association, Ben Herbert, Sean McConville from Brickville and the Traders Association, and Chris Thrum. We have items of correspondence from Vinicio Bottion, Sam Gunther, Strawn Lloyd and Jane Murphy. Submitters, can I check whether any other further submitters? Okay, I just did note seeing a submission from Peter Anderson from the Freight Association. Just couldn't see that there, but we can come back to that later on. Submitters will be invited to address the committee at the time of the relevant agenda item. You'll have 3 minutes to address the committee, and I will talk you through it when we get to it. We now move on to agenda item 5. Can I ask the question, is there anybody who wished to be heard tonight on any item who did not hear their name read out a moment ago? 6.2. Mr Moon. 6.2. Let me just take note of that. Westgate Tunnel, you'd like to speak on that item? Okay, great. Noted. Anybody else who would like the opportunity to speak to any of the agenda items before us this evening and hasn't heard their name called out? All right. We move on to public questions. Agenda item 5. At a 15-minute period will be provided at the beginning and end of this meeting for members of the public to ask questions. They Questions should not be greater than 90 seconds in duration, and I remind members of the public that this is not the time to make submissions. Submissions are made later in the meeting when a particular agenda item is before us. As at 10 a.m. today, there have been 8 written public questions received, 6 of which will be asked in person. I note that in reading out these questions, we are not attesting to the veracity or factual nature of any statements made. Now, public questions 1, 2 and 3 relate to graffiti, and David Watson and Stefano Perfili. David is with us in person, Stefano is with us via Zoom, and Amin Abbas is joining us via Zoom as well. I will now invite David Watson, who I believe is here in person. G'day, David, to ask a question.
Thank you very much. Council has stated in writing that graffiti is assessed on whether content is abusive, discriminatory, threatening, or likely to cause harm or distress, and that care is taken to ensure expressions of political opinion or advocacy are not mischaracterised as hate speech. Council has also confirmed in writing that 49 references to Free Gaza were counted in data provided to the Royal Commission on Anti-Semitism and Social Cohesion. My question is in 2 parts. 1, which of Council's stated criteria does the phrase Free Gaza meet? And 2, how is counting Free Gaza as anti-Semitic consistent with Council's stated commitment not to mischaracterise political expression as hate speech? Thank you.
Thank you for that question, David. We have a question now from Stefano Perfili, which is also, we understand, on graffiti. Stefano is joining us via Zoom, I believe. I'm hoping we can get that connection on the screen.
Yep. Can you hear me?
We can hear you, Stefano. We can't see you. Did you wish to be seen while you are speaking?
Yes, please.
Excellent.
Yep.
Now we can see and hear you loud and clear. Over to you for your question. A reminder, please keep it to 90 seconds.
Okay, thank you. So City of Melbourne's submission to the Royal Commission on Anti-Semitism and Social Cohesion cited 4,500 square metres of anti-Semitic graffiti and materials removed. Council has since confirmed in writing that 49 references to Free Gaza were included in the data provided, approximately 2.9% of the square metres in that submission. My question has 2 parts. 1, which of the following were also counted toward that figure? Free Palestine, the Palestinian flag, watermelon imagery, or the words Palestine, Gaza, or genocide? And 2, what proportion of the total did each represent? Thank you.
All right. Thank you for that question, Stefano. I'm now going to invite Amin Abbas to ask a question. And I believe, Stefano, you may be reading that question out. Is that correct? I can see you nodding. Okay, back to you, Stefano, so you can ask Amin's question.
Thank you. So City of Melbourne provided data to the Royal Commission on Anti-Semitism and Social Cohesion describing those 4,500 square metres of anti-Semitic graffiti and materials removed since 2023. It recently confirmed that this included the 49 references to Free Gaza. So this question is 2 parts. 1, what written criteria were used to decide that material was anti-Semitic rather than just offensive or unauthorised? And 2, does Council stand by that figure as a count of anti-Semitic material? And if not, will it correct the record with the Royal Commission? Thank you.
All right. Thank you for asking Amin's question there, Stefano. We'll now turn for an answer. And these questions relate to operational matters at the City of Melbourne. So I'm looking to an officer to respond on this. And I believe, Karen Miller, you're happy to respond on this item. Thank you. Over to you, Karen.
Thank you, Lord Mayor, through you. Thank you for your questions. City of Melbourne's submission to the Royal Commission of Anti-Semitism and Social Cohesion included data that was considered in line with our definition of offensive graffiti. The definition states, graffiti that is politically sensitive, racist, contains explicit language or content, or would offend a reasonable person, and in the context in which that graffiti was recorded, is defined as offensive graffiti. We can confirm that the data count did include the phrases you have asked about. All of these were amongst phrases that met the criteria of the policy, as the words formed part of phrases that could be construed as offensive or were in locations that caused offence or misinterpretation. References to any watermelon imagery were not included within the submission. The graffiti was removed in line with Council's definition of graffiti management policy and was not done with the intention of limiting political expression. Thank you.
All right, thank you for that response, Karen. And thank you for the efforts for our clean team here at the City as well. Okay, our next public questions, 4 and 5, relate to library bookings. And I believe, David Watson, you are going to ask a question again. Invite you back to the lectern, David.
Thank you very much for your time. So I'm here to ask a question about the recent suppression of free speech by the City of Melbourne. On Friday the 19th of June at 7 p.m, Council phoned to cancel Anti-Zionism Australia's paid confirmed booking at Catherine Syme Library for that Sunday 2 days later. It was the 6th seminar in a series. The first 5 ran at the library without incident. The speaker was Veronica Sherman, a Jewish Israeli woman. She has told this forum previously that her talk was educational and drawn from her own life experience, and that people online have harassed her through this council to silence her in person. Since that meeting, Council has confirmed in writing that Victoria Police had no specific intelligence about the event or any protest risk. The Council has told Veronica directly that she was also not a danger. Council relayed in the correspondence that the decision was not based on the content of the seminar or the identity of the speakers. The reason was heightened community tensions and representations about the seminar. So my question is 2 parts. 1, the community tension that required the cancellation was about, if the community tension that required the cancellation was neither about the speaker or the content, what was it about? And 2, what does a representation from the community have to show in terms of threat, for example, before it can cancel a lawfully paid booking with City of Melbourne Council?
Thank you very much for that question, David. I now invite Stefano Perfili, who's still with us on Zoom, who has a related question regarding the library booking. Over to you, Stefano.
Thank you. This is also about how on Friday, 19th of June at 7 p.m, the Council phoned to cancel Anti-Zionism Australia's paid confirmed room booking for the Christian Zionism seminar that Sunday. Council has not provided evidence of any operational risk assessment behind that cancellation. It cited potential protest activity and heightened community tensions without stating from whom or over what, and it has since confirmed Victoria Police advised there was no specific intelligence regarding the event. That leaves the representations themselves as the entire basis on which a lawful paid community seminar was cancelled 2 days out, and a speaker who had done nothing wrong lost her venue, and 60 people lost their right to free speech and assembly and to receive information. My question has 2 parts. 1, how many representations or expressions of concern did councillors or senior officers receive about this seminar in the days before 19th of June? 2, did any of those representations ask for the booking to be cancelled or threaten any action if it went ahead? Thank you.
Thank you, Stefano. I'm now going to refer your question and David's earlier question to officers because the decision about this library booking was an operational decision made by officers separate to councillors. And so I'm going to turn to Kirsty Pearce to please respond on behalf of the organisation.
Thank you, and through you, Lord Mayor, and thank you, David and Stefano, for your questions. I appreciate the concerns you have again raised regarding the cancellation of the booking. I also acknowledge the importance of freedom of expression in a democratic society. The City of Melbourne has a demonstrable record of supporting free speech across its range of public services, including at its libraries. The matters raised this evening relate to the same booking decision that was the subject of a number of questions at the previous FMC, at which time management provided a detailed response. In response to the further questions, the references to heightened community tensions related to the broader operating environment at the time and the potential implications for the safe and orderly management of council facilities and staff. Representations received by council are not in themselves determinative of any decision. Council does not cancel bookings simply because concerns are raised or objections are made. Rather, council considers a range of factors, including available information, risk considerations, operational obligations, and advice from relevant stakeholders. Management received feedback and representations from a range of sources, as often occurs with matters of public interest. No single representation determined the outcome. Rather, management considered the totality of the circumstances and exercised the discretion available under council's facility hire arrangements. Thank you again for raising this.
Thank you, Kirsty, for that response. We move to our next public question, which comes from Mary Lou Howie. I would now invite Mary Lou Howie from the Friends of Queen Victoria Market to make her way to the lectern and please ask her question.
Referencing the recent CBD news article on the 8th of July concerning the Lend-Lease Town Hall Station development, we commend the City of Melbourne for rejecting the major expansion of this development, warning that the proposal would overwhelm one of Melbourne's most significant civic gateways. Council officers, along with residents, were unconvinced by Lend-Lease's rationale for the increased scale of the project. Deputy Lord Mayor Rashina Campbell was particularly vocal in her criticisms of the project. She said that the proposal was inappropriate for one of Melbourne's most recognisable corners. I quote her, "There must be a balance in new builds between ensuring commercial viability and being an appropriate development for the location. We've received no strategic justification for the proposed height increases that would affect key civic views, heritage settings, and the Swanston Street public realm." End of quote. In the Town Hall Station quote, the FMC argued that commercial objectives must give way where there are unacceptable impacts on civic values. Yet, in the Garawa Place case, the development at the southern border of Queen Victoria Market, the committee accepted a development with potentially significant impacts on another nationally significant civic place, Vic Market. In rejecting the Town Hall Station proposal, I quote, "Commercial visibility must be balanced against place-based impacts." My question this evening is, what equivalent balancing exercise was undertaken for Garawa Place, particularly regarding the ongoing commercial viability of Queen Victoria Market itself?
Thank you very much, Mary Lou, for that question. I'll now refer that to Councillor Philip Leilu, who is the Deputy in the Planning Portfolio and can answer on behalf of the City.
Thank you. Thanks, Mary Lou. Always great to see you at Town Hall. And thank you for watching that eventful night. I think you all heard from all of us and how we talked about it. So a couple of things in your thing. So the comparison between the Town Hall proposal and the Grower Place development is not a direct one, as the two projects were considered under different statutory planning frameworks, strategic settings, and approval pathways. Grower Place forms part of the long-standing Queen Victoria Market Precinct Renewal Program and is located within an area subject to Development Plan Overlay 11 or DPO 11, which establishes the strategic planning framework for renew of the precinct and specifically contemplates substantial redevelopment outcomes on the southern side adjoining Queen Victoria Market. Council consideration of Grower Place occurred within that established planning framework and in the context of broader precinct renewal objectives that have been in place for many years. In contrast, the Town Hall Place proposal was assessed against a different planning framework and a different set of site-specific considerations relating to civic significance, heritage settings, public realm function, and view corridors associated with Federation Square's Flinders Street Station and Swanston Street. So Council was not responsible authority for approving either developments. For Grower Place, the ultimate planning and heritage approvals were matters for the Minister for Planning, Heritage Victoria, and given Queen Victoria's Market's national heritage status, the federal government or the Australian government under the Environmental Protection and Biodiversity Conservation Act, Grower Place was actually subject to a detailed Commonwealth assessment process and subsequently received approval subject to conditions. So in considering Grower Place, Council assessed whether or not the proposal was consistent with the strategic intent, build form settings, and renewal objectives established through the relevant planning controls and the broader Queen Victoria Market precinct renewal programs. These objectives include heritage conservation, market renewal, public realm improvements, new public open space, restoration of the Franklin Street stores, replacement parking, housing delivery, and long-term activation of the precinct. The committee's support for the community infrastructure plan and its consideration of Grower Place is therefore not consistent. The renewal program includes delivery of Market Squares as approximately 1.8 hectares of new public open space, together with the replacement parking infrastructure with the future public realm accessibility and market infrastructure outcomes forming part of the broader precinct renewal strategy. While heritage, amenities, public realm, and economic considerations were relevant to both matters, the weight given to those considerations differed because of the proposal involved different sites, different planning controls, different strategic objectives, and different statutory decision-making frameworks.
Unfortunately, the impact is quite the same. Queen Victoria Market is an important civic asset.
Completely agree.
All right.
You know that.
Thank you very much, Mary Lou, for your question. The time for public questions has now lapsed. Will be a further 15 minutes allocated at the end of the other agenda items for us to return to public questions if people have questions they wish to ask. And we still have 2 written questions to get to as well. But now we move on to agenda item 6, reports from management. And I'm going to call on Councillor Lei Lu to assume the role of chair of the meeting in relation to reports where council exercises its responsibilities under the Planning and Environment Act 1987. So over to you, Councillor Lei Lu.
Sure, there is one report from management. So there's agenda item 6.1, planning permit application TP 2021-709/A 620 to 632 Little Bourke Street, Melbourne. Would councillors like a presentation on this particular item? No? Okay, so I now call on Paul Little, Planning and Property Partners, who requested the opportunity to address the committee in relation to this matter, to speak for no more than 3 minutes. Thank you.
Lord Mayor, councillors forming part of the Future Melbourne Committee, thank you for the opportunity to address you this evening. I act for the trustees of the 638 LB Trust, well named after the property, no doubt, in relation to an existing planning permit to realise a not insignificant hotel of about 198 rooms, along with associated car parking. The planning controls exist under the capital city zone. There are 3 separate DDOs and, of course, a heritage overlay which identifies the building as being individually significant. The subject site and indeed the existing planning permit was issued on the 5th of December 2003 following a unanimous resolution of councils in relation to supporting the application earlier that October. There were no appeals lodged in relation to the proposal. I'm going to deal with this matter in a past, present and future context in the context of this committee. Firstly, this project has been through a fairly long gestation involving engagement with the City of Melbourne's Melbourne Design Review Panel. I reiterate that process was hugely constructive to this building and the design presentation that's been approved to date. There's no fundamental departure from those principles that were enshrined through the existing approval, aside from what has been a process of reviewing the buildability and realisation of this project. What that's meant is that Cleve Lane, which is a eastern abuttal to the property, which provides access not just to the subject site but also to adjoining buildings, provides access to several hundred car parking spaces servicing other buildings. In order to provide for gantry for construction, for delivery of materials, in order to then prop the adjoining brick wall to Cleve Lane, would prove very difficult in terms of access maintenance for Cleve Lane. In recognition of this situation, our client instructed us to pursue an amendment to the permit, which in essence, and aside from some minor modifications to the internal operation of the building, seeks to temporarily demolish the building that sits adjacent to Cleve Lane, and then reinstate with the same brickwork to better detail than exists today as a result of the realisation of the project. This has involved detailed engagement with council's heritage consultants and advisors, planners and the referral bodies. It has involved our client committing to, on request of course, provision of a comprehensive plan in relation to conservation management for the works that are proposed. It's resulted in a very favourable officer's recommendation, which we support in whole, and ideally would result in a notice of decision from councils this evening if you're so inclined. The continuation of the proposal will be ongoing from this point in relation to design, development, engineering, buildability, and our client does have intentions of starting the project in either late this year, 2026, or early 2027. Thank you, councillors.
Thank you. Any other questions for Paul? No? Okay, thank you, Paul. If there's no other speakers to this, I'm happy to move a motion that is on screens. If you can put forward. Yep, it's that. I'm looking for a seconder. Thank you, Lord Mayor. So I'll speak to this more. Thank you for that. And so this is application seeks to amend the previously approved development at 620 to 632 Little Bourke Street to allow for the demolition and reconstruction of the eastern wall, reduce the basement footprint, adjust internal layouts, and update parking provisions. In terms of the heritage, the building is categorised as significant. The additional demolition of the eastern wall is proposed, and the amended approach is subject to enhanced conservation, archive recording of the building, and clear reconstruction methodology. The proposal reduces the overall intensity of the development, including a reduction of the gross area floor area, 10,530 metres square to 9,996 metres square, hotel rooms, and cars parking 22 to 10 spaces. While increasing the communal facilities and bicycle parkings, the basement is also proposed to be reduced from 2 levels to 1 level. The proposal also includes the internal reconfiguration of the hotel, resulting in a reduction in room numbers from 207 to 196, changes to the room mix and sizes, with larger one and 1 2-bedroom rooms, and an increase in communal facilities from 152 metres square to 254 metres square to improve shared amenities for guests. And the proposed amendments will retain the previously approved heights, setbacks, and architecture of the original approval. And as a result, as we see up there, is the committee resignation. So more than happy to support that. I really do love the reciprocal flow of electricity. That was a very artistic and very good way to actually do it, and matches actually with the design. And so based on that, I'm very, very happy to support this, and look forward to finally not seeing the garage door that I always drive past that place every single time. I will miss it, but I think what's going to be in there is going to be even more beautiful. So thank you to yourself, to the team for doing amazing work. I think it's going to be an amazing part of what is an area there, and looking forward to it. Lord Mayor, if you want to speak.
Thank you, Councillor Leilu. I think you've summarised it very well. I will say more broadly, this is a welcome development at the west end of the CBD. It'll bring new visitor accommodation to the city, active ground floor uses, and increase pedestrian activity to the western end of the CBD, contributing to a more vibrant and engaging city environment. As Councillor Leilu has detailed, we think this proposal is actually better than the original in terms of less intensity of the development with the reduction in hotel rooms from 207 to 196 and a better proportioned interior that will make it a more enjoyable visit for people who stay at the hotel. The key question really for decision here, and sorry, I should say, and there's no change to the exterior, the built form envelope. The real question here is around conservation and heritage and the eastern wall and, of course, the significant heritage building at 620 to 632 Little Bourke Street, the former power substation, a beautiful red brick building, got a lot of character. The red brick and the blue stone is part of the fabric and colour palette of Melbourne. And so whenever one of these old buildings is being affected by development, it does attract a lot of interest around our city, and that's a good thing. But I think that the conservation plan that's before us looks very comprehensive. It will require the use of the original detailing and materials wherever possible, including the reuse of the original bricks, which we love. So all things considered, very happy to support this proposed amendment.
Thank you. Would any other councillors like to speak to it? Councillor Raf-Camelo.
Thank you, Councillor Lilio. The application seeks to, thank you, Lord Mayor, Councillor. The application seeks to amend the previously approved development at 620, 632 Little Bourke Street to allow for the demolition and reconstruction of the eastern wall, reduce the basement area, reduce car and bicycle parking, and undertaking internal rearrangements. So the key issue before us this evening is the treatment of the Eastern Heritage Wall. But myself and the officers, I think, are satisfied that while additional demolition is proposed, the heritage outcome is a properly management through conservation requirements, detailing, recording, and reconstruction measures, and the amended otherwise results in a reduced intensified development with no change to the approved building form. So this multi-story residential hotel will make, I think, a valuable contribution to Melbourne. So I will be supporting this amended application to the previously approved development. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Raf-Camelo. Anybody else who'd like to speak to it?
Can I just ask a question?
Sure.
Can I just ask a question? I think it was Paul. Was it always exciting to see more hotels going up in the city of Melbourne? Out of curiosity, who is running the hotel?
The hotel operators, well, the hotel firstly will be built in association with a fairly prominent developer in Melbourne called Blue Earth Group, or BEG Developments. Michael Dibb, who's the principal of that business, along with founders of another hotel, being the Oakwood, which is in the South Bank precinct, will continue their establishment of new hotels in Melbourne through the delivery of this project. The actual branding of the hotel is not yet resolved, but that's the backers of the project.
Sounds good. Sounds like a vote of confidence in Melbourne's visitor economy.
Very much so.
Cool, thank you. Anybody else? No? If that's the case, I now put this motion to the vote. All those in favour, please raise your hand. I think that's unanimous. Thank you. And now I'll call on the Lord Mayor to resume the role of chair.
Thank you, Councillor Leilu. We move on to agenda item 6.3, Westgate Tunnel Impacts Update. Would councillors like a presentation on this agenda item? Yes, I'm seeing nods, so I'm going to invite David Callow and Karen Miller to the lectern. Karen, I think you're going to lead us off. Thank you. This is an item before us which covers both traffic and trees, two things that generate a lot of interest here in the city of Melbourne. So over to you, Karen.
Thank you, through you, Lord Mayor. Thank you. Today we are bringing back an update on the Westgate Tunnel. The purpose is to report back to Council following a resolution on the 14th of April 2026. The update covers two main topics. The first is the tree replacement update, and the second is traffic monitoring, including heavy vehicle movements following the tunnel opening on the 14th of December 2025. David Callow, who is our Director of Trees and Parks and Greening, sorry, I didn't write that bit down. And myself, I'll come back and he will talk about the trees, and I'll come back and I will talk about the impact for the traffic monitoring.
Great, thanks Karen, and good evening Lord Mayor and councillors. As Karen said, I'll be providing an update on tree replacements for the Westgate Tunnel project and the proposal from the City of Melbourne. If we go to next slide please. Okay, this is my slide. I've got two slides tonight. Just some key points there for councillors and members of the public. There were 891 trees removed from within the City of Melbourne for the Westgate Tunnel project. The trees that were removed were mainly canopy street trees in North and West Melbourne and Docklands. These were principally along Footscray Road and Wurundjeri Way. Our annual canopy mapping program revealed that approximately 9,000 square metres of tree canopy was lost as a result of those tree removals. So the project responded in February 2018 and made a commitment that trees would be replaced within the City of Melbourne at a ratio of 5:1 trees for every tree that was removed within our municipal boundary. Some 6 years later, Minister Pearson, then the Minister for Transport Infrastructure, wrote to Lord Mayor Sally Capp, reconfirming that commitment and suggesting that a more cost-effective approach was paramount. The narrative behind that new commitment was essentially we had worked with the authority for many years and over those 6 years, and there was a gap between how the replacement trees could be delivered and where they would be delivered. The City of Melbourne position is that the replacement trees should be in streets where tree canopy is most needed to combat the urban heat island effect. You can see in the table on screen, to achieve the 5:1 replacement, the project would need to deliver, or in partnership with City of Melbourne, nearly 3,000 additional trees, which is the bold there at the bottom of the table. You can see the project delivered 1,176 trees within the project area, but that shortfall still remains. If we go to the next slide, please. So just in summary, our assessment shows that it's not possible to achieve the 5:1 replacement ratio, and that's for a couple of key reasons. Firstly, our preferred replacement location is in streets, and planting in streets costs a lot more than planting in open space. The typical costs from projects within the City of Melbourne in streetscapes can vary between $1,700 and just over $7,000, depending on the complexity of a streetscape. There is also limited space available for wide-scale tree planting near the project. In the City of Melbourne, we don't have greenfield sites where they're available for mass planting of trees. And generally, just around the 5:1 ratio, a ratio like 5:1 is not suitable for inner-city environments. This would suit mass planting sites, perhaps in the outer metropolitan councils, and is not a reliable or workable metric for offsetting lost tree canopy in urban environments. Our proposal, which I'll detail in a moment, is based on urban forestry principles which underpin our urban forest strategy and our urban forest precinct plans. And we believe that the City of Melbourne proposal, which focuses on tree canopy that's been lost and will be replaced, is a superior outcome compared to what could be achieved through a 5:1 ratio or that sort of approach. So the City of Melbourne proposal here outlined on screen is to seek compensation to fund a tree replacement program that will double the tree canopy area that was removed by the project by 2040. So 9,000 square metres of canopy was removed. So we would seek the funding from the project to deliver over 18,000 square metres of canopy. This would be achieved by planting fewer advanced trees in designed growing environments in streets. So typically what we do, This is our business as usual practice, is we create space, we integrate water-sensitive urban design, we amend soils, and create new environments for trees to grow within the roadway rather than the footpath. This would align with our urban forest strategy goals for North and West Melbourne and Docklands, which is to achieve in streets an average of 40% tree canopy cover. This would also provide tangible amenity environmental benefits to those directly impacted by the projects, the communities of North and West Melbourne and also in Docklands, and would be where there are local streets with low tree canopy cover. This would provide an evidence-based approach. It would build on the delivery of our urban forest precinct plans and would concentrate on streetscapes, as I indicated before, are where tree canopy cover is needed most. The final 2 points outline there that this proposal is consistent with the approach we took for the Metro Tunnel project, where they committed early in that project process to double canopy cover that was lost by 2040, and we worked with them to establish the number of trees that would be required to do that. The proposal would also deliver the recently endorsed North and West Melbourne and Docklands urban forest precinct plans that were before this committee a couple of weeks ago within 3 years, which is a fast-track delivery rather than the planned 10-year implementation. The benefits would be realised much sooner, and we would continue that work over that time frame. That concludes the presentation that I have, and I'll hand back to Karen. Thank you.
Actually, David, before you return to your seat, it might be worth just seeing if there's any questions for you on this tree replacement issue. Councillors, are there any questions for David? Councillor Dr. Ball.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Thank you very much, David. I know there's a great deal of community interest in this redirection in terms of our tree planting plans. So I have a few questions. What is Vida Roads?
Vida Roads?
The report doesn't say what it is.
Yeah, apologies. So Vida Roads, the Victorian Infrastructure Delivery Authority. So they're essentially the state government authority responsible for major road projects. They've got North East Link, Westgate Tunnel and the other big build roads on their agenda.
So when in your report it says that the Westgate Tunnel project is going to pay, is that the same thing as Vida Roads?
That is, yeah.
Okay,
the authority
effectively
became
the
Vida
state
Roads.
Government,
Yes.
in effect. Okay, thank you very much. And you mentioned in paragraph 18 that the project was approved on the basis of a 5-to-1 ratio across the entire project area before that promise was altered subsequently. But if that was the environmental approval at the outset, does this change in proposal mean that the 5-to-1 ratio will still be achieved across the entire project area, just not within the City of Melbourne?
Okay, thank you for the question through you, Lord Mayor. I can't speak for Vida Roads in terms of their achievement of the 5-to-1 ratio outside our municipality. So the commitment, I can't speak. That would be a question for Vida Roads.
Okay. So who has the enforcement authority for compliance with that environmental approval?
I'm not certain who the approval authority would be. The commitment is on the public record.
Yeah.
So I think the accountability sits with us, sits with the public. But I'm happy to come back to you with further information around the approval authority if that helps.
Thank you. I think that would mollify all of us to some degree if they are meeting that condition of the approval, even if it's not possible, as you say, within our municipality. So I'd be glad to know on notice. Thank you. Paragraph 22 says that the Westgate project will pay the City of Melbourne to plant the remaining trees, and paragraph 50 says suggests that that will include labour costs, our labour costs to plant the trees. Is that correct?
That's correct. So we would ask the authority, or Vida Roads in this case, for all costs associated with the tree planting. We don't want to be in a position where City of Melbourne is having to subsidise this outcome on behalf of the authority.
Thank you very much. Will it also cover the high-quality growing environments envisaged in paragraph 22?
Yes. So paragraph 22 outlines the high quality growing environments. As I alluded to before, this is our business as usual practice. So when we plant a tree in a street, we're looking for a tree that will grow quickly in a good growing environment. So that's water sensitive urban design wherever we can. It's amended or replaced soils. It's typically a curb out stand to protect that tree. It might be a series of bollards. That's the sort of environment we're talking for these streetscapes.
And those costs are all covered?
They are, yes.
Fantastic. And will the City of Melbourne get to decide on the species that will be planted?
That's our proposal, yes. So the proposal aligns with the delivery of the urban forest precinct plans. In those precinct plans, it outlines a palette of trees for that neighbourhood and that precinct, and we would be drawing from that. Essentially, we are asking Vita Roads for the money for City of Melbourne to deliver this project entirely.
According to our policy and
Absolutely.
plans. Yeah,
Yes.
Fantastic. And finally, if we plant the trees under this proposal in accelerated timescale from 10 years reduced to 3 years, would we not therefore reach the canopy target sooner than 2040?
Potentially, we would achieve our canopy target sooner. The sooner a tree is in the ground, it is contributing to canopy as soon as it starts growing. So that's a potential outcome, but I think that would be of great benefit to those local communities.
Okay, thank you very much. I have further questions about the traffic management, but they will be for Karen. Thank you, David.
Thank you,
Thanks.
Councillor Ball. I have some questions as well, David. So under the original agreement with Vita Roads, how was the funding of the 5-to-1 replanting to be shared between the City of Melbourne and Vita Roads?
Thank you, Lord Mayor, for the question. My understanding is Vita Roads was entirely responsible for the delivery and funding of the replacement trees.
And under the proposal before us this evening, you're putting to us that the City of Melbourne engage in a negotiation with Vita Roads, move away from the 5-to-1 formula, replace it with a tree canopy formula, which I think we've heard quite convincingly is a superior way of getting better outcomes for communities, particularly streets. But under that proposal, what would be the share of the split of funds for delivering on that new target between the City of Melbourne and Vita Roads?
Great, thanks for the question, Lord Mayor. The delivery of the doubling of tree canopy cover by 2040 would be entirely at the cost of the state government. We would ask them for all of that funding, including, as I was saying before to Councillor Dr. Ball's question, including the officer time to consult, to organise, to supervise the contractors doing that work.
So the cost would, like the 5-to-1 agreement, be borne by Vita Roads?
Absolutely, yes.
Okay, so why then does the first bullet point in that slide say it will not be possible to achieve the 5-to-1 replacement ratio due to, first bullet point, high cost of tree planting in urban streets?
Thank you, Lord Mayor, for the question. So if we were to hold Vita Roads to the 3,000 or so trees that were required to be planted, there's a couple of issues there. The second point there talks about available space. We wouldn't be able to fit those 3,000 trees into those local streetscapes, for one. Secondly, the cost, if we applied a typical City of Melbourne cost, which is somewhere between $1,700 and $7,000, we would be talking in the order of, it could be northwards of $20 million to deliver those 3,000 trees in streetscapes, although we wouldn't have space to fit those trees in.
Okay. And you don't believe that Vita Roads would be prepared to pay that amount of money, even though there was a previous agreement to do so?
So the timeline that was on the previous slide showed over about a 6-year period, we continued to work with Vita Roads, or the Westgate Tunnel Authority as they were previously known. We put proposals to them. We were unable to reach agreement about what the funding would be for that 3,000 tree gap.
And in any case, you're saying to us this evening that it's a formula that couldn't be properly delivered on because you couldn't fit that many trees in the streets of Kensington?
True. Thank you, Lord Mayor. Yes, as I alluded to before, if we were starting with this authority in this project, our first position from an urban forestry perspective would be to say, align with our urban forest strategy, aim to double tree canopy cover by 2040 for any tree you remove. That's exactly the outcome we were able to achieve with the Metro Tunnel project. Unfortunately, with the Westgate Tunnel project, it went in a different direction around a ratio.
Right. Any other questions? Councillor Owen Guest.
Thank you. Very quickly, just following on the Lord Mayor's questioning, I think I can accept that canopy cover is a better measure if you say so. I just asked the question, why are we finding out the problems, if you like, in the previous metrics and promises made previously? Why are we only finding this out now? What led to the previous thoughts, if you like, and processes that went into place, I guess, some years ago?
Okay, thank you, Councillor Guest, for the question. Through you, Lord Mayor. As the project was in planning, we advocated for particular outcomes around urban forestry. They weren't achieved with this particular project. So we got the 5-to-1 commitment. Then we sought to find a way how we could work with the authority on that 5-to-1 commitment. We were unable to find a way forward. Now we've come back to them and said, this is the way we do business at the City of Melbourne. We think this is a great outcome for these local communities. This is the current proposal.
Okay, thanks, David. That's good. Cheers.
Any other questions for David Callow? No, thank you, David, for that presentation and those questions and answers. Over to you now, Karen Miller. Let's talk trucks.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. May I have the next slide, please? Okay, so City of Melbourne and the Department of Transport and Planning have been monitoring traffic patterns since the Westgate Tunnel opening. An agreed 6-monthly monitoring period concluded on the 30th of June. The monitoring included traffic volumes, speed analysis, and heavy vehicle monitoring. There were 49 sites across North and West Melbourne where we monitored traffic and cyclists with the intent to establish if traffic patterns were as expected. So the purpose of this slide is just to inform people about where those monitoring points were. May I have the next slide, please? Okay, it is expected that DTP will finalise their analysis in August, and they should publish that on their webpage, we're hoping from September. The draft analysis at the end of May was indicating that traffic patterns were as expected, with the exception of additional heavy vehicles in Kensington. As a result, it's expected that the temporary measures installed prior to the opening of the tunnel will remain and hence be made permanent at some point in the future. So again, this slide here has the purpose of showing where all of the temporary installations were installed prior to the tunnel opening so that people understand where those are. Next slide. So in Kensington, as I said, we found that the traffic wasn't moving as expected. So we've got the green lines there showing the traffic as it was heading across the Westgate Bridge. The blue line is showing the new Westgate Tunnel to the ports. The reds are showing where the truck bans were installed in the west of Melbourne. What we then can see is the number 1 indicates where the new toll point was put on the freeway prior to both the tunnel and the bridge, prior to the tunnel opening. The yellow line shows where the trucks, we believe, for Kensington, where we saw 3 times as many trucks in Kensington post the opening of the tunnel, were coming off of the freeway potentially, we don't know for certain, but were heading along the Geelong Road and finding themselves on Kensington through Epsom Road and then Kensington Road to make it to their destination at the ports, which is the pink section. And it's for that reason that what we're recommending is that we have some traffic bans installed on the local roads of Epsom and Kensington Road. Now, Macaulay Road already has a traffic ban on it, but it has an exception that allows trucks over height of 3.7 metres to travel on Macaulay Road for when Racecourse Road on the arterial road, due to the height limit of the bridge on that road. So at the moment, the recommendation is that we have a full truck ban on Kensington Road, with Epsom Road having the restriction to allow the traffic to make it to Macaulay Road if needed to be, or the higher overheight vehicles. So the distance is, so if I just say where we're talking about Kensington Road between Dynon Road and the intersection of Epsom and Macaulay Roads, and Epsom Road between Racecourse Road and the intersection. And so what you can see from this map is that there's 2 or 3 ways that heavy vehicle trucks can make it to the ports, even with the western suburbs closure of roads. And some trucks have chosen, we believe, to utilise that route through Kensington to avoid the tolls. The next slide is just demonstrating a positive outcome from all the analysis that's been undertaken, which is that we've introduced, with the support from DTP, it's now in place on Victoria Street, Spencer Street and King Street, that we have got lower speed limits on those roads now from 60 down to 50. The QVM area there marked is currently still 50. It's one part of the remaining of our local roads to reduce to 40 kilometres an hour as per our transport strategy. And there are some streets in Kensington as well that will be converted back to 40 kilometres an hour. That's it for my main slides. I have some other ones if you ask some questions that are needed, but I don't think they're needed necessarily.
All right, thank you for that presentation, Karen. Now looking to councillors to see if they have any questions of Karen following that presentation. Councillor Ball.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Thank you very much, Karen. Thank you for the slides. Since they're not included in the report, could they be published on our website?
I believe so, yes.
Thank you. That'd be great. I just wanted to clarify who has done the monitoring and who has the data, because paragraph 24 said the TAP team did the data, and paragraph 29 says council has been monitoring traffic, and paragraph 26 says DTP will publish their results in some form. So who has actually done the monitoring and who has the data?
So both organisations have been undertaking monitoring, and we've been sharing data over the last 6 months. DTP, though, are responsible for producing the end of 6 monthly report that will then be published on their webpage.
I see. And will we contribute our data to that report?
We have been contributing our data as we've gone along, as we've collected it, yes.
So there'll be one report encapsulating both?
Correct.
I see. That's helpful. Thank you. There's 2 documents cited in your report, the guidance for establishment of truck curfews and a heavy vehicle route assessment guidelines. Are they publicly available documents?
Yes, both are. They're publicly available on the Victorian Department of Transport and Planning webpage, as well as the National Heavy Vehicle Regulator webpage.
Tremendous. That's for anyone who wants to look into the weeds. Thank you. I'm curious how, if we know, because I don't, how truck drivers will decide their routes. Would they use a navigator commonly, and are there apps especially for truck drivers so that they will avoid no truck zones and incorporate DTP's advisory routes? I mean, I'm wondering how effective it will be, your proposal to update or ask DTP to update their website. How effective is that going to be in changing truck driver behaviour?
Okay, so it's the heavy vehicle regulator who has the maps that provides the information to the industry of where trucks can and cannot go, is our understanding. So whether or not the truck company uses software, don't know, but that's where their information is. We haven't asked that question. With respect to the DTP advisory, that was about education. So they created a freight user guide for the opening of the Westgate Tunnel, and in that they produced some maps with some recommended routes. So our conversations that we've had with DTP is that they have been in consultation and discussion the whole way through all of our discussions with the heavy freight industry. And so whether or not it will be work, it's better that it's corrected than being incorrect, which is what we had at the beginning.
Certainly. So is that when there are revisions such as that we propose, do you know if they're pushed out to drivers at all or just left on a website for them to? I
believe it's gazetted, and so it would be pushed out to the industry through their mechanism of gazetting the streets. So if we are successful through our application for truck bans, they will be gazetted and put out.
Thank you. Paragraph 37 says that truck ban applications must be supported by data and stakeholder engagement. will DTP do that data analysis and engagement, or will we do that?
So the normal process is that the applicant does it. So we, as the applicant, as council, would normally undertake that data analysis and stakeholder engagement and then submit that as our supporting information. And then DTP will obviously do their own due diligence on that information.
So would the follow-up to that, if we do the analysis ourselves and we propose certain truck ban streets become a no truck zones, we would be then modelling where trucks would go instead. And would those people affected, stakeholders affected by those alternate routes that we anticipate would become more used, would they be subject to consultation as well?
I'm just reading to see what they're messaging me. Wait
Does
one
that
second.
make sense?
It does. I think that in answer to your question, our submission is about the situation that we're in and the impact that has on us. And obviously, as part of the analysis that DTP are doing is to look at what the impact has on the overall network, on the arterial road network, of any changes that we're asking. So I probably have to ask a few more questions and come back to you on how that works.
Because we are doing the engagement, so we decide who we engage with. I'm not proposing engagement with outside of the municipality, but there may be, if we make certain roads banned for trucks, that those trucks will use other routes within the municipality.
So the rules of the truck bans are about ensuring that trucks are travelling on roads that they're designed to travel on. So all of the analysis that we've been doing is to make sure that all the traffic is moving as expected by the modelling that was done before the tunnel was opened. And so if we go to Kensington as an example, there is an increase in trucks that was unexpected because the trucks aren't travelling on the roads that they were expected to travel on. So the purpose of the truck bans is to move the trucks back to where we were expecting them to travel.
Okay, thank you. Paragraph 40 says that the National Heavy Vehicle Regulator must seek local government consent before giving restricted access vehicles permits to use local roads. Does this mean council can refuse to approve such routes?
It can. So the relevant road manager or the council for local roads can refuse to give consent for a restricted access vehicle, but it's only under specified circumstances. So examples might include road geometry, narrow roads, bridge loading. It's not an unfettered discretion of we can just say no to everybody.
Okay, thank you very much. Our transport strategy aims for speed limits of no more than 40 kilometres per hour on all local roads and for lower speed limits on all arterial roads as well. Paragraph 45 of your report says that you're advocating for speed limit reductions, quote, where appropriate, but our established council policy is that it's appropriate basically everywhere. Are you advocating for speed limits of no more than 40 kilometres on all local roads as per the strategy and for reductions on all arterial roads?
So yes, definitely for local roads. We've got a plan this year to finish off the rolling out of the 40 kilometre an hour speed limit across our local roads. And for arterial roads, we can only advocate for DTP to lower speed limits. And so for at the moment, for the arterial roads that we talked about in Spencer Street, King Street, Victoria Street, they've reduced the speed limit from 60 to 50 kilometres an hour. And we'll continue to advocate for 40, but again, it will be up to their analysis of their decision making.
So when your report says we will be reducing speed limits on some local roads in Kensington this year, can you tell us which roads?
Yes. So Stubbs Street is the only local road currently still with a 60 kilometre an hour speed limit, and it's our plan to reduce that in this financial year.
Tremendous, thank you.
Oh, sorry, I lied. Kensington Road is also 50 kilometres an hour. There's a plan to reduce that as well.
To 40?
Roads. Yep.
Stubbs and Kensington
And
Road.
we have approval from, so it requires approval from DTP, even if it's a local road, to reduce the speed limit, and we have approval for those roads.
Thank you. Paragraph 50 says some of the work to create truck bans will be funded through the operational budget. Couldn't all of that work be covered by the TAP fund?
So at the moment, it's just the time of officers who've been doing the investigation to submit. So any changes to the network, we would put in a submission through the TAP funding.
of an infrastructural kind? Are there no fees, application fees?
We'd have to check that and what the rules are.
Fair enough. Are the speed limit reductions underway this month being paid for out of the TAP fund?
Yes, and they've occurred.
They've finished. Tremendous. Part of the impacts of the heavy vehicles is their noise and pollution and climate risk. Is any level of government, to your knowledge, working to shift the freight sector to electric vehicles, whether rail or road?
We believe that the Victorian government has a target to reach net zero emissions for freight transport by 2045. So grants are available for small and medium businesses to assist with their decarbonisation. So yes,
Small businesses.
There's a lot. I've got a lot more information. They've given me quite a lot. Do you want to know all of it?
Maybe I won't press my luck at this page, but thank you if you'd like to send that through. That would be great.
Perfect.
I have only two more questions. Is there a role for a no air brake zone on truck routes, which is not mentioned in your report, and there's other names given to air brakes? Is there a role for that kind of restriction where trucks will continue to use routes within the City of Melbourne?
I believe so. So there is a standard. It's called a truck avoid using engine brake sign. It's an advisory sign which is used on an ad hoc basis, and it's used on arterial roads in residential areas. So again, it's something that we could put to DTP for
ad hoc but permanent signs.
Permanent, yes, but it's not in every location. But we could ask for them.
And do we need DTP approval to do that?
We would do because it's their road.
They're only on arterial roads?
Correct.
Yeah, okay, thank you. And my final question is, when is the Spencer Street Master Plan due for consideration?
I believe that they're planning to come back to FMC in Q4 of this financial year.
Okay, thank you very much, Karen. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Ball. Other questions from councillors? Councillor Owen Guest.
Yeah, just quickly, am I correct in saying we've already reduced some speed limits in the area? Is that correct?
Correct.
And it hasn't had the effect of dissuading trucks from using those roads?
So I don't think the speed limit has been the driver for the choices. It's been about avoiding the toll charges, is what we believe, for the increase in trucks on Kensington.
Sure. So, but we're going ahead with reducing speed limits regardless.
We will, because it's a safer outcome to have lower speed limits.
Well, safer, but at a cost. Obviously, as we reduce speeds, we reduce efficiency, we reduce the capacity for business, we reduce the economy. Nothing is free. I mean, if it was just about safety, we'd go to a speed limit of 0. Obviously, other things have to be taken into account. So I'm just sort of highlighting this, that the council does have a policy. We have a lot of policies that not everybody agrees with. So, yeah, I'm clarifying. It's not due to the trucks, which is the issue that I thought was the primary issue here. It's more of a smokescreen to be able to reduce speeds anyway. Thank you.
All right. I've got a couple of quick questions, Karen. First one is just on Macaulay Roads. So friends in Kensington, some of whom might be addressing us tonight, regularly send me photographs of big trucks, 6-axle trucks on Macaulay Road. And it is a road that's attracted a lot of community attention in recent times because of tragic events. What has their studies told us about Macaulay Road?
So the results showed that there was no increase in the larger heavy vehicles on Macaulay Road from pre-tunnel opening.
All right, and just to be clear, the restrictions on Macaulay Road are no trucks except for those that are 3.7 metres or higher.
Correct.
In other words, if you're a mid-sized truck, you can't drive there. If you're a small truck, you can't. But if you're a big truck, a six-axle, 19 metres, you can.
Correct, with the exception that local destination trucks are also allowed to use a truck ban road.
As part of a general exemption, sure. All right, thank you for that. The second question is, as part of the introduction of the Westgate Tunnel, we have seen 7 roads have truck bans or truck restrictions put on them in the western suburbs of Melbourne, Altona North, Spotswood, Footscray, etc. And as part of those new restrictions, they've got cameras being put in to help with enforcement. Would it be your view that putting some cameras on any roads which were getting truck restrictions in the City of Melbourne would be helpful?
I think that if you wanted to govern it, then that is the best way. Otherwise, it's up to I believe, the heavy goods vehicle. I'm looking over there for a nod. The heavy goods vehicle regulator is the enforcer, and so they would have to have somebody there to see the truck, while the camera would be a permanent solution.
All right, and then my third and final question is there were 7 roads that have received truck restrictions to the west of the City of Melbourne as a result of the opening of the Westgate Tunnel. We're often told that we can't move on some of these road issues because we've got to wait for the modelling of the Westgate Tunnel and how the traffic patterns change. Was there any modelling done of traffic on the Westgate Tunnel prior to those 7 roads being closed to the west of our municipality?
I want to say yes, because all of our data is being compared back to June 2025.
Okay. So it must have been hypothetical modelling based on a road that wasn't yet open.
Correct.
Okay. All right. Thank you for that. Any other questions for Councillor Raphael Camillo?
Karen, I have a very simple question that are being asked by 3 constituents. So you banned the trucks in some of those streets. What's the consequence if someone needs to deliver it and use a truck for that? Just to clarification, it's a simple question, but I get asked all the time, please.
So a truck ban has an exemption for local destination requirements.
Okay, done.
All right. I don't think there's any further questions. Thank you.
Sorry.
Oh, apologies.
Just a
Councillor Andrew Rouse, over to you.
A couple of quick ones. The speed reduction 60 to 50, at your best guess, what's the point-to-point length of that period of road?
I'm definitely looking at Kevin for this one.
Few
hundred metres, you said.
So the loss in time from 60 to 50, 12 seconds per... So we're talking a 6-second increase in travel time?
Correct.
Second question, the diagram we had in relation to the number of trucks... are we able to get that up on the screen again if possible? Can I just clarify, is that trucks per day, trucks per hour, trucks per morning peak? Just to gauge a better understanding of what we're looking at there in terms of the data. I don't think I
don't think we put any data up at all around truck volumes. We had the locations. So on the first slide of this section, sorry.
So to make sure I'm understanding.
So this is just the next slide back. Other way.
One before this one, sorry.
Before. Yep, this one. So this is just showing the monitoring locations. It's not the volumes.
Fantastic. All right. Just wanted to clarify
Yep.
that one. And final question. As you said, the assumption that predicates all of these changes is that the biggest driver isn't changed. In fact, by the trucks taking the route they're taking, they're probably taking longer, I presume, to get from point A to point B. But the biggest driver, the assumption is the cost or cost avoidance per se. Has the City of Melbourne considered advocating to state government to go through a period of cost removal in the tunnel, as we saw perhaps with the Metro Tunnel, to get people using it and understanding the value and benefit of it? I know they did that during January on the weekends when obviously most commercial trucks probably aren't operating, but is that something that we've considered or is it something we could consider as an advocacy position to state government for a period to allow trucks to use that road for free so drivers can A, understand the value the road might create for them, but B, more importantly for us to get a baseline if cost is the number one driver, i.e. if we make the road free for a period of time, we see truck numbers drop, we know for sure that the driver is cost. rather than anything else.
We haven't had that conversation with DTP at this point, no.
Councillor Ball.
Sorry, I have a follow-up question about the Spencer Street master plan, because the report we received just in April this year said the draft master plan will be updated following internal stakeholder input and presented to councillors for initial discussion in August next month. So your answer just earlier was that we would see it in Q4 of this financial year, which is a good 6 months or more later.
If you can let me check that with the team that are doing that, I'll come back to you.
Tremendous, thank you.
Thanks.
All right, thank you, Karen. I'm sure you welcome the scrutiny here at the City of Melbourne that you get on these items. Really appreciate your responses and the effort that has gone into this paper. All right, we have received some requests to speak on this item this evening. So before we go any further, I would like to call on Sean Kilper, who is joining us via Zoom, I understand, who requested the opportunity to address the committee in relation to this item. There you are. Sean, can we just check that you can hear us and we can hear you?
I can. Can you hear me all good there?
We can indeed. Over to you, Sean. You've got 3 minutes. Sorry,
perfect. Thank you, Lord Mayor. I'll keep it quick. And good evening, councillors. Thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight. Firstly, can I say that I welcome the work the council has undertaken in monitoring and responding to the impacts of the Westgate Tunnel. And I strongly support the continued advocacy outlined in this report to improve safety and amenity across our inner city neighbourhoods. So I guess with the changing traffic patterns resulting from the Westgate Tunnel, I saw it as an opportunity and an appropriate time to reflect on the whole network in the area and existing road safety issues that continue to present significant risks, and consider how that might be addressed as part of this overall review. So without further ado, if we want to go to the next slide, please, I'd like to draw the attention of the group today to the King Street and Curzon Street turn, which is pointed out in a lovely pink arrow there. And I'd like to say as well that I represent a number of local residents and businesses in relation to this matter. If I go to the next slide here, you'll see at this corner, this is just a sample of the repeated history of vehicle strikes at this exact corner. I know a number of councillors have been reached out to by myself and others as well about this over the last couple of years. There's no less than 6 in this group here, but certainly this is just a sample of cars hitting, flattening the bike hoops, as you can see there on that corner. And you can see the photos where those bike hoops are right where people are crossing at this busy pedestrian, cyclist, workers, residential area in inner city North Melbourne. So this location, as I say, is clearly having repeated incidents and demonstrating that it's a series of not isolated driver errors, but a more significant issue that warrants, I think, further safety reviews. I'll just say that over the past few months, I've worked closely with council officers, particularly Harry Markow from the Transport Engineering Department. I want to acknowledge and thank both the officers and councillors I've reached out to who have engaged sincerely and with the seriousness of this issue that I think it deserves. If we go to the last slide, I just want to bring to the attention a potential concept of how this could be resolved. Firstly, I'd like to also reiterate the 40-kilometre reductions. I know this is a DTP managed road. I've also been in contact with the Minister for Transport, Minister Ros Spence, as well. But my suggestion here is to continue allowing full access, however, to reduce the sort of speeds and the sort of behaviours that go through here through a single lane turn and entrance. So just my final word is my hope is simply the council continues to advocate with the Department of Transport and Planning for this intersection, and that strong advocacy continues before something more serious will happen here at some point. So thank you for the time, and that's it.
All right, thank you, Sean, and thank you for the trouble you've gone to with that submission. You make a very strong point. I now call on... Do you have a question? No, you cannot comment now. You can ask a question, but you cannot comment. You can
I'd like to ask the CEO if he could comment on that, because this question comes pop up in council, and we already have many discussions in relate to that area. I went there, visited myself, and Rick, if you could mention anything, what council's already doing about that, please.
Through you, Lord Mayor, and thank you for the question, Councillor Camillo. Given that Sean has been working with our transport and traffic staff, it would make sense for our staff to continue working with Sean to work through the issues. DTP have been monitoring traffic movements within this area, and given the significant amount of data that we have, we're still working through the settling of those traffic patterns. And once that period is ended, which is sort of around now, DTP are working to put a report together to summarise those outcomes. So we'll work with DTP with the outcome for this particular intersection and go back to Sean on that outcome.
Good. All right, I now call on Tony Bailey, who requested the opportunity to speak. Welcome to Town Hall, Tony. So you know the drill. Please make your way to the lectern, and you have 3 minutes to address us.
Thank you, Lord Mayor and councillors, for the opportunity to come and talk to you tonight. 12 years ago, we shifted to Kensington from Sale. I did my due diligence when we shifted. I knew there was a lot of traffic in the area, but we weren't prepared for the trucks. It's just amazing what has happened. The removalist that took us here was scared to come in because he said he'd get fined. Even the current Melways shows that the road here is only supposed to be 4.5 tonnes coming up Macaulay Road. Nobody's policing any of this. It shouldn't have been allowed to happen with the Westgate Tunnel opening, trucks not wanting to pay tolls, forcing them to avoid the tolls by going to the docks via Footscray. Melbourne Council banned the trucks, and the trucks have moved to Kensington, as we all know. Council should have foreseen this as a problem, and it was going to cause major problems for Kensington. The Maribyrnong residents saw their problems, and their council have fixed it. We all know we need trucks, but not in the residential streets. Put them on the primary arterial roads. The size of the trucks make them dangerous. The roads around here are not designed for them. They are far too heavy. They bounce and clatter as they go past our houses. They vibrate the windows. People can't get to sleep. You've got a health issue here. Like, think of the mental problems that are going to come up. The pollution is just amazing. I sent a photo in, I don't know whether you've got it there, and it's the pollution that's on our windowsills, just 2 weeks worth. So we're breathing this. It's just so wrong. People have got asthma, they're coughing. What are we going to do about it? There's no policing going on. It's just, you talk about cameras, that's what you're going to have, and lots of them. So what we are asking you is to make it a 24/7 no truck zone. And that's the only way to fix it up. It's no good slowing the traffic down. So we need to get them moved. We need to have speed signs that are illuminated that actually tell you what the speed limit is. You can't see the speed limits, they're hidden by trees. And the trucks just abuse it. So all I'm doing is asking you to
remove the trucks completely. That's what we need to happen. And think of people's health, the kids here, the incidents that I've seen. It's just so wrong. And we want to make this our peaceful village it was when we first came here.
Thank you for that,
you,
Tony. It is indeed a beautiful village, and we want to see it always be that way.
Thank you for the opportunity.
That's right. All right. Our next request to speak comes from Dr. Kate Kennedy from the Kensington Association. Great to have you back at Town Hall. Kate, thanks for everything you do in Kensington.
Thank you, Lord Mayor, and thank you, councillors. And also I'd like to say thanks to the work that's been done looking into this, particularly since when we made our submission on the 14th of April and the monitoring of the trucks. So we look forward to what the data is. And the points of clarification that have come out from the two presentations had answered some of our questions in terms of what we put into our submission. I guess for us, we are a little bit anxious about monitoring and what can happen because in 2016, the association was involved with making original submissions to the Westgate Tunnel project. It's all on the public record, and you can see our number one point was, can we have some traffic monitoring for truck movement and traffic movement in Kensington? Now, it's 10 years, and this is only happening now, and so we're very much, we told you so. I know that's sort of looking back, but we are aware of it. So it doesn't give us a lot of confidence in terms of being able to see if there is a strong commitment from the state government to address this, really. So that's our major concern at this point. I think we've still got a work in progress in terms of looking at the numbers and what can happen. The other major confounder, of course, is the 3.7 over truck ban, which we don't see that as being a truck ban. It's like a just deterrent policy for trucks who inadvertently need a detour from being stuck in the Newmarket rail bridge. So I just wonder, with keeping that on, are we just going to be then sending trucks through Epsom and Macaulay Road? And, okay, Kensington Road would need a full truck ban and traffic camera monitoring to make that work, but we would ask for similar conditions to be on Epsom and Macaulay, or we need some sort of other guarantees or some sort of modelling that that is not going to happen. And in terms of, I also did put a submission in for the trees, and thank you for that canopy clarification. But again, we really do ask you if you could hold the state government and make them accountable for their commitments in this process, because it seems that over 10 years, over many ministerial changes, many bureaucratic changes, things seem to just slip off the agenda. And we just don't have a lot of faith that it's going to come through within this time, and we're heading into an election and things will be prorogued, and next minute we'll all be still living with the trucks and no one to ask what to happen. So there's a matter of urgency in this process for us. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much, Kate.
Question.
Yes, please, over to you, Councillor Ball.
So, Dr. Kennedy, are you asking...
Sorry, Kate, there's a question for you from a councillor.
It's for Dr. Kennedy, but also, I guess, for Karen.
Yeah.
If you're are you asking whether there was traffic modelling or traffic monitoring, rather, done prior to the opening of the...
Well, we does ask for that.
Tunnel.
And I don't believe it was.
Is that the case, Karen? Are you... Because I thought it was implied in the report that there was before and after.
Yes, there was monitoring done in June 2025, which is what we're comparing the data to.
In all Kensington Road?
In all of them.
Okay. We haven't sort of ever seen any of that. Or...
Is that publicly available?
We haven't shared it at this point.
We haven't shared it. So did we undertake the monitoring?
Yes, we did. Sorry.
If I recall that
It'll be part of the final report, is what they're saying.
that map that you put up with the monitoring sites, did that distinguish our monitoring from DTP's monitoring?
The Kensington site formed part of the DTP monitoring, and we did our own monitoring in Kensington, following the petition that came in March.
Sorry, did you just answer whether it's publicly available? The pre-opening monitoring?
We haven't made it publicly available at this point, but we believe it will form part of the reporting, but we'll confirm that.
The reporting by DTP?
Correct.
I mean, it only makes sense with before and after, really,
Correct.
doesn't it? You can't say that there's been an unexpected increase unless we know that there's
at what point? Yeah, at what point is that monitored?
So we monitored the trucks back in June 2025, which is what we've compared to, which is why we know there are 3 times more trucks.
And to your knowledge, DTP did not undertake any monitoring before the opening of the tunnel?
That was just truck counting, was it? That was just a truck count?
Not in this precinct, no, but we did.
DTP did no traffic monitoring before they opened the tunnel?
No.
No, they didn't do traffic monitoring in this precinct. We did the traffic monitoring in the precinct.
Meaning Kensington?
In Kensington.
I see.
Which is
so they did do other traffic monitoring before opening the tunnel?
Yes, they did all the northwest Melbourne locations.
I see.
Which is what we did ask for in our original environmental statement project for the Westgate Tunnel. Just saying.
Okay, well, thank you for doing that.
And just to clarify, Karen, that it would be your expectation, or maybe this is to you, Rick, as acting CEO or GM of infrastructure, that the City of Melbourne traffic data would be released along with the DTP data very soon. Nick, a matter of weeks we're talking, aren't we?
That's correct, yes.
Yeah, okay.
Sorry, Lord Mayor.
Councillor Camillo.
Can I just ask a question for you, please? You told for the period of 10 years you have been advocating that and no success of the state government. Did you have contact to your local MP? She represent you guys in there? Because it sounds like the culpa is always in the city of Melbourne, but the state government not doing anything, and you had a local MP for 12 years in there. Do you got any positive feedback? Are they helping? Can you give me some feedback on that, please?
Well, I guess we did have a representative on the Westgate Tunnel Consultative Group. So I think everything was sort of a work in progress and going on. I can't comment about and there are public minutes around those questions as well. I do believe possibly if the toll fares were just set recently, like at the last minute here, that's a big factor in terms of decision making, what people are going to use their trucks for. So the cost of the tolls, if that's been set very late in the project, they were only set sort of in late last year. This has an impact on driver behaviour and drivers' use of the tunnel. So, like if the tunnel was free, the trucks wouldn't be in Kensington; they'd be on the tunnel. So there's a number of variables that have gone on there. Our local member has been asking questions of the minister in Parliament, and I'm not sure if it's been a work in progress. So nothing has happened until it's just bang, it opened, and then next minute we had trucks on the road in January. So leading up into that time, all the decisions around the cost of the tunnel, it wasn't apparent until very late.
Right, thank you for that response, Kate, and just remind councillors to contain their questions to the item that's before us tonight for a decision. Our next request to speak comes from Ben Herbert, to speak for no more than 3 minutes. Welcome to Town Hall, Ben.
Thanks for having me. I'll have a prepared statement and then I'll add a few additional items that I've heard tonight. So good evening, councillors. Firstly, I'd like to thank Councillor Griffith, Councillor Camillo, Karen, Kevin and Harry for the openness, transparency and willingness to engage with me through the review of the truck impacts in Kensington. Since the petition was presented, they have taken the time to listen to the issues, explain the technical investigations and keep me informed as the work has progressed. That level of consultation has been greatly appreciated and I look forward to continuing these conversations. I'd also like to acknowledge Council for recognising what the residents have been saying for many months, that Kensington has experienced an unintended increase in heavy traffic movements following the opening of the Westgate Tunnel and that targeting mitigation is required. The report outlines a number of positive actions, including proposed truck bans on Kensington Road and Epsom Road, turning restrictions, updates to freight rate mapping, lower speed limits, and continuing investigations into mitigation measures. My question has two parts tonight. Firstly, can Council provide the community with an expected implementation timeline for each of these mitigation measures? Specifically, when will the application for Kensington Road and Epsom Road truck bans be formally submitted to DTP? What is the expected timeframe for DTP to assess those applications? When is the freight route mapping expected to be updated on the HVR website? When can residents expect turning restrictions to be implemented? Should they be approved on Kensington and Epsom Road? And what are the anticipated timeframes for any further mitigation measures currently under investigation? I'm happy to take those under notice. Secondly, recognising that many of these decisions ultimately sit with the state government, what advocacy is Council undertaking to help progress these outcomes? Will Council be engaging directly with the member from Melbourne and the relevant state ministers, including the Minister for Planning and the Minister for Roads and Road Safety, to advocate for the timely approval and implementation of these measures? Alternatively, will Council be working with Councillor Griffith, who has an existing relationship with state government, to help facilitate those discussions and ensure Kensington remains a priority? The community understands that not every outcome is within the Council's control. The pressure coming today from both newspaper and radio articles from the Lord Mayor help push the messaging. However, knowing both the expected timelines and the advocacy strategy would provide residents with the confidence that momentum is being maintained and that Council is doing everything possible to see these commitments translated into real improvements on the ground. A couple of additional notes. Is the port considered a local destination requirement? That was a statement made by Karen earlier. I want to understand if the implementation is put on Kensington Road, whether that becomes a local destination for trucks. High detour signage currently directs people north at Epsom Road and Smithfield Road. Therefore, a 24/7 truck ban should be achievable throughout Macaulay and Epsom Roads. Reiterating what Kate said, Ellen Sandler is pushing this message to stop trucks in the area through State Parliament and has provided a statement during question time this year. My last statement, Councillor Guest, following on from your earlier comments relating to this, I suggest you come down to Kensington and watch the trucks do 50 down Kensington Road Hill and further your opinions. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you for your submission. Ben, you had a couple of questions. I think we can quickly try and address those. The first one was just around timelines for engagement with the Victorian Government. So engagement has already commenced around Epsom Road and Kensington Road as part of an alternative motion that's you'll see on the screen shortly. Also, I'll be writing to the Premier and the relevant minister on this as well, with an expanded range of measures in addition to what's seen in the council report. I know Councillor Griffiths has been very active as well. I think it's been a real team Melbourne approach, actually, with direct engagement already with the Premier, with the minister. And so now you're going to see that significantly step up as a result of a council decision being made tonight. Sadly, these things always seem to take longer than common sense would seem to suggest they should. But you should know that the council is now very focused, and the fact that we've gone about commissioning our own data collection over and above anything being done by the state goes to that point. Councillor Griffith, did you want to add anything there? When you come to Rick, did you want to respond as acting CEO to any of the questions from Ben?
Only to say that the report outlines our approach in relation to truck bans on those key roads. We are also looking at Macaulay Road as an additional section of road that needs to be addressed. Department of Transport and Planning is the appropriate state agency from our perspective that actually implements those bans, and they'll take our application under consideration. And generally speaking, in terms of timing, these usually take a few months to run through. So I guess that goes to some of the timing in relation to implementation.
Just on, am I able to ask another question on that? What is and it's something I haven't heard about tonight, the consideration around turning restrictions. Where does that exist in this plan? Is that something that needs to be approved by DTP, or is that something that can be implemented by the City of Melbourne?
Karen, do you want to speak to that, particularly Epsom Road, Macaulay Road and Kensington?
And I think the photos that were shown earlier kind of do justice as to what that conversation's about.
I've actually got a positive statement on this one in that we have received approval from the DTP for the changes at that intersection.
When will they be implemented, Karen?
In a few weeks, Kevin says.
So you're telling me, just want to make this correct, 19-metre vehicles will not be able to turn onto Kensington Road legally from a couple of weeks' time?
It's 17 metres, and the answer to that is yes.
That's an even better result. I think it's important for everyone here to understand that this is where it becomes important for us as local residents to be able to communicate with those businesses that we know are taking the absolute mickey of Kensington Road at the moment. But now it becomes an illegal move, not just I'm taking a rat run.
All right.
Sorry.
Thank you, Ben. We appreciate your submission this evening. Please return to your seat and we will move on to our next submitter. I now call Sean McConville from Brickville. For many people, especially children, their happiest place in the world. Sean, over to you.
I'd prepared a whole speech now. I'm not going to go through it all because a lot of it's already been covered and I feel like a lot of the questions have already been answered. Thanks for giving me the opportunity today, Lord Mayor and councillors. You guys visited I know David and Nick came and visited our area and had a look around, and they were there to look at, the memorial for the young guy that was killed last year. I just want to reiterate the points in our support from a Kensington Business Association point of view. I think the only things that I will add to what the guys have already presented is that enforcement is key here. Truck bans are not effective without enforcement. We've seen it with Francis Street in Yarraville. They had no support, they weren't getting any reduction in trucks in that street until they actually implemented a camera system, and they had 400 fines in 2 weeks, and then they stopped using that street. So it's completely ineffective without true enforcement. So we just the signage doesn't work on Macaulay Road. We see trucks every day. I have a shop right on Macaulay Road, and we see it all the time. It's completely ineffective. I'm not sure about the truck modelling. There was a commentary mentioned before about comparison to data prior to in 2025 in June. We'd already seen some increase in traffic during that period because of Dinan Road closures, Footscray Road closures, all the other closures that have been occurring. So in my mind, any modelling that occurred comparing to 12 months ago is borderline ineffective because a lot of trucks were already using that area, and the modelling really needs to be prior to any commencement of works on the Westgate Tunnel. Otherwise, it's borderline useless to the outcome. As a market researcher, I kind of that's my view anyway. I don't know. I'd need to see more data. I noticed there was a lot of data in there that said it was commercial in confidence around this information. I'd love to see the modelling, and I'm assuming that'll be coming soon. But as a resident, as a business owner, as a parent, as being involved in the community in many ways, I get people coming to see me all the time. I've got a Lego shop in Kensington, and I'm the president of the Kensington Business Association. Our focus has been on beautification and amenity, and my concern is that the amenity and beautification is ineffective as well without improvements to the reduction in trucks. The trucks are really affecting our business. People are unwilling to use the street just for their normal driving. We already have issues with lots of closed shops and everything else that happens in that area. So we're hoping that the bans actually do get put in place, but I'd hate to see that come at the expense of costs to these truck companies. In some ways, I prefer them to use that road. So I liked the suggestion that was made around reductions in fees or a short period to show them the usefulness of the actual tunnel. If that can be put in place, then I think that would actually provide some benefit because it needs to be moved to the right roads. It's as simple as that. It can't just be moved to another residential street. It's a waste of energy. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much, Sean, for your submission this evening, and thanks for everything you do with the Kensington Business Association. as well. We have a request to speak from Chris Thrum on this item. Chris, request you make your way to the lectern. And Aaron, I haven't forgotten your request to speak. You will be our next and final speaker, I believe, on this item.
Thank you, Lord Mayor, councillors, men and women of Old Melbourne Town. First, start off by thanking Karen Miller and David Keller for their presentations. I'd like to echo the sentiments of a lot of the speakers from tonight already. I'd like to thank Councillor David Griffiths for his work in Kensington area in regards to this matter. Rowan Leppert, he said that this is a dog's breakfast. He was really alarmed when this was first brought to the attention when he was a councillor of the City of Melbourne. And I'm sure Rowan would be very, very keen to see a tremendous positive outcome for the residents. In regards to the trees, I'll first start off by saying we're on Wurundjeri country, respect to elders past and present. Melbourne Town Hall sits on the unceded lands of the Wurundjeri Woi-wurrung people. Thanks to David Callow in regards to the trees. The original director of the Royal Botanic Gardens, Ferdinand Muir, would appreciate the negotiating skills you're going to require to negotiate transitioning from the ratio solution to improving the tree canopy cover from 9,000 square metres to 18,000 square metres. But I'm sure that with all the skills that the City of Melbourne's got, we'll be able to do that in a positive, proactive manner. I do note that in terms of stakeholder engagement, that Racing Victoria has not been engaged in regards to this matter. Flemington Racecourse is just around the corner. The horse transport trucks travel along Smithfield Road and Racecourse Road predominantly. So maybe because not many horse transport trucks are going to go all the Macaulay train tracks that you have not engaged them. However, I think it's important that you have not engaged with Racing Victoria, and I think that they should be consulted and discussed in what's going on. I'm sure they'd be interested in sort of the solutions that are required for all the locals in the area. So there's a lot of work that's got to be done, and I would say to all the residents that City of Melbourne is being very proactive in finding solutions for you, and moving forward, I'm sure that we can improve the situation in a great deal.
Right. Thank you for that presentation. Chris, I now invite Aaron Moon as our final presenter this evening on this item.
Thank you, Lord Mayor, for letting me speak. Good evening, councillors. As much as almost everyone and everything connected to Westgate Tunnel project and the transport frustrates me and the community, my submission will actually be focused on the tree replacement commitment. I have to say I was pretty genuinely shocked to read that the proposed 5-to-1 tree replacement ratio is now proposed to be abandoned in favour of canopy coverage targets. The report states that 891 trees were removed and there is a shortfall of almost 3,000 trees. I appreciate that increasing canopy cover is an important objective. Large, healthy trees provide shade, reduce the urban heat and improve our city's resilience to climate change. But I don't believe that canopy coverage should be the only metric that we should use to measure success. Trees are much more than just their shade. They are habitats. Every additional tree creates opportunities for native birds' nests so they can nest, forage and move around through our municipality. Every single mature tree may provide excellent canopy, but 3 or 4 smaller trees spread out across the neighbourhood can provide multiple habitats in opportunities and strengthen biodiversity. We shouldn't reduce thousands of future trees just to tick the box on a canopy calculation. The report also cites that the high cost and limited space available for planting as reasons why the 5-to-1 commitment is no longer achievable. But respectfully, I struggle with that justification. This is something that should have been properly assessed by Westgate Tunnel or state government before the commitment was made. And if a 5-to-1 replacement was promised by the government, then surely they should be responsible to make this happen, rather than asking the community to accept a reduced outcome years later. Why is the council assisting the state government to walk back this promise? $21 million is a trivial amount of money when we're talking about the overall cost of that project at $10 billion. Finally, I don't accept that this has to be an either-or choice between canopy and amount of trees. The report says the focus should be on areas most affected by the project. Of course, those neighbourhoods deserve priority, but we're talking about nearly 3,000 trees. This is the amount every year we plant. So surely there's some scope to both restore those directly impacted and identify new opportunities across the wider municipality where the canopy is lacking. So in summary, this council has consistently championed urban greening and biodiversity. At the last meeting, Nick Rees, you called everyone tree huggers, for instance. I encourage councillors to continue advocating for the 5-to-1 original commitment rather than accepting a reduced target. Melbourne deserves both more canopy and more trees.
Thank you very much, Aaron, for that presentation. That concludes our submissions this evening. So we're now going to move to a motion before councillors. There is a management motion, but I don't believe there is a mover or a seconder for that. So I'll request that an alternative motion please be put on the screen. Yep, and then we just keep scrolling down there, please, to see. Yep, keep going. Yep, that is it. All right, I'm happy to move that motion. I'm looking for a seconder. Thank you, Councillor Camillo. I will now speak to this item. Trucks and trees, two things that we are deeply interested in here at the City of Melbourne. And I want to begin by thanking all those people who have made the effort to make submissions on this item before us this evening, and for all of you who are active in your communities. We have a better city because of that activism. The report responds to Council's request for an assessment of the impacts of the Westgate Tunnel project, and despite certainly many challenges, I do want everybody who has submitted to know, and everyone in the Kensington community and indeed the inner north, to know that this is an issue which the City of Melbourne is very engaged on. The Westgate Tunnel project is having a significant impact on the City of Melbourne local streets. Blind Freddie can tell you that. But in the world of good transport and infrastructure planning, we do need to build evidence bases and have data to support major investment decisions. And that is why the City of Melbourne has engaged in the traffic monitoring that has been done, as well as the work that we are supporting with DTP. Our traffic monitoring now gives us the concrete evidence that confirms what we have heard from residents this evening, and more. We've seen 3 times as many heavy trucks on Epsom and Kensington roads since the Westgate Tunnel opened, with 19-metre long vehicles roaring past schools, parks and childcare centres. We have seen bigger trucks using Macaulay Road, and that is something which is, there's no place for trucks of that size on the heritage high streets of the inner city, particularly beautiful high streets like that we have in Macaulay. So our officers have worked with the community and with road operators since we recall there was over 1,000 people who signed a petition last year around the Westgate Tunnel, and we will continue to work on this issue, and we will keep going, and we will keep going, and we will keep going until we have amenity to the level that the residents of Kensington and the inner north deserve and rightly demand. So there's a couple of things here in this this alternative motion this evening that I want to call out. Firstly, we have been successful in getting speeds reduced to 50 kilometres an hour on King Street, Victoria Street and Spencer Street. We will be seeing further pursuit of reduction in speed limits, 50 kilometres an hour on Stubb Street and 40 kilometres across neighbourhood roads. And we will continue to work away on that to see those speed limits being reduced. I've said this many times before, some people think it's controversial, but I want to see speed limits come down across our entire municipality. And I think we need to see a focus on that in the west of the municipality at the moment because of the additional traffic we're seeing because of the Westgate Tunnel. We have also been working to get correct freight route information to get trucks back on the roads that they actually should be using. We do have a gazetted freight route across Melbourne, and so we need to get the trucks onto those roads and off roads which are just not suitable for these big trucks. So, as part of this motion this evening, we will be writing to the Minister and the Premier regarding Epsom and Kensington roads to have them made 24/7 truck-free roads. We are also pursuing, as you've heard, with vigour, the changes to the intersection of Epsom and Kensington and Macaulay Road to change the turning there, to stop the trucks using that part of our municipality as a rat run. We're also seeking for changes. We're also seeking changes to Macaulay Road as well. The fact that this is a no truck street, except for trucks over 3.7 metres, just defies logic. It just defies all sense of common sense. Again, why would you not have trucks on that road? Well, because it's a beautiful, popular high street, which is enjoyed by so many people, and so it makes no sense that we would be allowing trucks of 3.7 metres or bigger through there, and so we will be looking to have those bigger trucks removed from Kensington Road as well. We will also, as a sidebar to this discussion tonight, be seeking to have trucks removed from Kavanagh Street in Southbank, which is another part of the municipality, but it's another local road which is subject to an unreasonable impact of big trucks. We have saw on the diagram earlier this evening all those roads to the west of the city of Melbourne that have been had truck restrictions put on them, 7 in total. And so it's only fair that we see similar sorts of restrictions being put on roads in the city of Melbourne. We've also heard tonight that roads to the west of the city of Melbourne that have got these new truck bans on them have cameras put on them as well, funded by the Department of Transport, DTP, to help with enforcement of those new no truck zones. And so this motion tonight is seeking there in 10.2.1.2 that we seek cameras to be put on those roads in the City of Melbourne where there are truck restrictions being placed as well. And finally, I thought Sean's submission earlier about Curzon and Victoria Streets, I thought there were some very good points made there. And I understand from Rick that there will now be vigorous pursuit with DTP because they are DTP roads, those two. But we will be pursuing that as a matter of urgency as well, particularly worried to see the bike hoops there being knocked down clearly by large vehicles. On the question of trees, look, David Callow is one of the best arborists in Australia. We are very pleased and delighted to have him here at the City of Melbourne. And so when someone like David does tell you, hey, using a canopy cover measure is a better way to go about tree planting on the streets of Kensington, well, I can tell you, me as a councillor, I defer to an expert on this. And on this case, I think he's got the case right. I do also think that we can't just let the Victorian government off the hook here around this commitment to new trees and new plantings. And so I do know that we have tree planting precincts in this area, particularly the Moonee Ponds Creek corridor. And so I would ask that as part of the conversation that's going to be picked up with DTP and as part of the TAP process, that we look to see, yes, let's deliver on the 40% canopy cover on those streets, but let's also pursue additional trees in those planting precincts. And I would call for a special focus on the Moonee Ponds Creek corridor, which could use some new plantings along the lines we have heard this evening. So with all that considered, I would urge councillors to support this alternative motion that is before us this evening. It is a much stronger, much tougher set of actions that we are pursuing to tackle trucks, do more on trees, and get better outcomes for the community of Kensington and for the inner north of our city. Over to you, Councillor Camillo.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I'm going to try to be brief because the night has been very long. But first of all, I'm very pleased to be seconding this motion and support this motion before us tonight. But first of all, I also like to thank everyone who has made a submission this evening, as well acknowledge and thank all the residents who signed the petitions led by Sybil Gibbs and Ben Habit, and also Sean from Business Association and Kate from the residents group. You guys helped me to have a lot of knowledge going there, visiting, especially being in that intersection of Epsom, Macaulay and Kensington. I went once with the residents, then I went twice with myself and drove around Kensington and pushed the passion that you guys took with 1,000 signatures, push us to go in there, bring the staff in here from the City of Melbourne, having listening posts, and that's helped us to form what's the paper in here today. Thank you very much. So the opening of the tunnel has delivered significant change to traffic movements across our entire municipality. While many of those changes were anticipated, the increasing heavy vehicles movement and the continued use of local streets as rat runs, like we heard many times tonight. And this still remains a significant concern. As outlined in the report, the analysis suggests some heavy vehicles may be avoiding tolls, and they're doing that. The Westgate Freeway and the tunnel, I'm seeing videos, they practically empty now. Everyone's driving the local roads instead. Our residents have rightly raised concerns about the impact this has on safety, noise, neighborhood amenity, and the conditions of our roads, particularly near schools, childcare centers, parks, and residential streets. The safety of our local streets must come first. Local roads should not become an alternative freight route simply to allow trucks to avoid payment tolls. That is not what these streets were designed for, and it is placed an unfair burden in our communities. I'm pleased that our officers have not only identified these issues, but they are actually working with the Department of Transport and Planning to pursue tracks bans, turning restriction, improving freight routines, and further speed reductions where appropriate. The report also notes that as a result of the Westgate Tunnel project, 891 trees were removed from within the city of Melbourne, resulting in the loss of approximately 9,000 square meters of canopy. I recognize that, but we need to get a realistic outcome. And I'm pleased that the city of Melbourne finally come out with an outcome on that because it was not realistic. So the council's officers proposed an alternative approach that you double the canopy cover that was lost from the project, delivering a lasting environment benefit for future generations, but quicker than what was promised. I would like to thank our officers for their ongoing work and advocacy on both of these important issues. I look forward to seeing these proposed mitigation measures implemented in a very near future. Of course, it depends on the state government being very positive, to seeing a meaningful improvement for residents, neighborhood, business, and for our community. Back to you, Lord Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Camillo. Over to you, Councillor David Griffiths.
Thank you, Lord Mayor, and let me echo the thanks of both yourself and Councillor Camillo for everyone who's come and made a submission tonight, and all of those people who've been advocating on a range of issues that are contained in this motion for a long period of time. I'm going to do a little mea culpa just to begin with, which is to say to all of those people that I met at the Kensington Flemington Writers' Festival on the weekend that I'd be moving this motion. It's great to have the excitement and support of so many, including the Lord Mayor. So I'm obviously not moving it, but that doesn't detract from my excitement. I didn't need to mislead people at that festival on the weekend. Taking a few of the issues then that we're considering, obviously, with my environment portfolio hat on, I want to thank David Callow and the team for the very large amount of work that's gone in, both to the recommendations that we're looking at here, but over a long period of time to bring us this outcome. Like many people, David has taken me on a journey from an initial reaction about the changes to how we'd asked the state government to plant trees to this outcome, which I think ultimately is a better one. And along the way there, seeing some of the photos that David has shown councillors about the plantings that have already been undertaken in other places. Allied with the opportunity a couple of weeks ago to plant the 3,000th tree of the previous financial year. And I do that to make the point that that was down in Faraday Street. It was a tree that was being planted to replace plantings that had been done a number of years earlier where the subsoils hadn't been prepared correctly, where the tree that had been selected, the species, wasn't appropriate to the conditions it would be growing in. That was done, I'm sure, more than just healing in the sapling, but without the kind of work that we'd be seeking the trees that would be being planted out of this agreement were it to come. It was done without that kind of preparation, done without that kind of understanding, and emphasises the need for every tree that we are planting to be done in the City of Melbourne way, the best possible way, rather than just simply trying to make a number of trunks stack up. Coming to the truck matters, and again, thanking all of the people who have taken the time to contact me, whether that's through formal catch-ups and meetings or random catch-ups in the sunny streets of Kensington, as I saw Kate on Friday, and it's good to see how widely supported the amendments that we have tonight amongst councillors are picking up the news that Karen was talking about there about the turning ban, and it was great to have that matter fully explored, fully ventilated in this meeting tonight, and I think people will take hope and nourishment from the knowledge that of that announcement, but really wanting to see that being done as part of a comprehensive strategy that really demonstrates what both state government and local government can do when they're working together. I think this is what that motion is going to allow us to do, based on all of that data that's been collected and the knowledge that is now being analysed by officers at both levels of government, and really just emphasising the point that as part of that strategic approach, more than just one corner, it has to be a comprehensive approach, and making sure that we don't create problems for other parts of the municipality. We've just spent a lot of time and work working with the City of Moonee Valley, working with Yarra Trams, working with DTP and others around our Racecourse Road strategic improvement plan, and making sure that we're not just pushing the problem a few steps further along and impacting residents on the other side of Kensington, and of course making sure that my beloved 57 tram, my spirit animal as I like to say, and Chris Thrum and I speak about the 57 a lot, that we're not just pushing trucks off one road into the cables that power the 57 tram on another road. So I'm very happy to see this motion and very happy to support it. It's an important step along the journey that we're on when it comes to trucks in Kensington.
Thank you, Councillor Griffiths, and thank you for your activism in Kensington as well. Any other councillors wish to speak to this? Councillor Dr. Ball.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I just want, for the benefit of those of us who weren't here at the beginning of this project, including myself, in 2018, when this was proposed, it's worth stating, it was proposed before that, I think, but the TAP program was proposed in 2018, and this council has been opposed to the Westgate Tunnel from the beginning, precisely because of its environmental impacts, broadly understood as to include amenity on local residents. That has been the position of this council from the very beginning. And of course, it's beyond our control and it went ahead. We gave conditional support with the creation of the Transport and Amenity Program in 2018. And for those of you who want to have a look at that again, you can find on the Department of Premier and Cabinet's website the press release issued by the then Lord Mayor Sally Capp and the Treasurer Tim Pallas at the time. And that created a $100 million fund to be spent explicitly and exclusively to ameliorate these types of impacts as we're seeing in this report for the communities affected. And very little of that has been spent. A bit over 13 million of 100 million has been spent so far, and at this rate it will take another 56 years. So we propose to accelerate the spending, and that's certainly what we have to see because the impacts are being felt day and night. I further wish to just mention, since the Lord Mayor recommended increased tree planting along the Moonee Ponds Creek, that the TAP fund is explicitly for that purpose. The announcement in 2018 explicitly mentions the Moonee Ponds Creek and the parklands we want for that corridor. So that fund is not just for altering streetscapes and signs and traffic mitigation. It is expressly and from the outset both for traffic mitigation and for improving public, open and green space, specifically mentioning the Moonee Ponds Creek. So that fund should be spent on the exact tree planting that the Lord Mayor recommended. This money coming from Vida Roads has, we hope, will be agreed with them through this proposal to be spent on our urban precinct forestry plans. that is careful policy work done in close consultation with the community to decide where the trees are best planted for the benefit of the community and what species and so forth, in consultation with the people affected, to get the maximum community benefit, not just the maximum number of trees where it's convenient and cheapest to put them. So I'm very happy to support this outcome. I'm very grateful for years of work that's gone into it, and for threading this needle, because it's a dance and a negotiation with other levels of government, which we cannot, of course, mandate or control. But I really want to thank all of our staff on both the truck side and the tree side who have reached this point for us tonight. We look forward to, of course, a great deal more work, a great deal more information. And I want to thank the Lord Mayor and others who have provided these amendments, which I hope go some way to the concerns that we've heard from the community tonight and in writing. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Ball. Any other councillors? Councillor Owen Guest.
Thank you, Nick. And just make a comment in part to address Ben's comment in case there was a misconception. I absolutely empathise with trucks going down your suburban streets. I don't live in Kensington, I live this way, but I have trucks coming up and down our street all the time. So my point is that, as this is titled here, Westgate Tunnel Impacts, and the impact is, you are rightly saying, on you, that you are receiving far more trucks than you ever have as a result of the Westgate Tunnel and the fact that it has a toll attached to it, and that is the problem that we should be addressing. My disappointment is more, if you like, within the City of Melbourne, that we're using it as a fulcrum, if you like, to push an alternative agenda, which is to get unilateral speed limits throughout inner Melbourne, which I don't think is a great solution. The solution, though, I think has been talked out here. By and large, I think trucks have little place on suburban streets. I'd imagine a blanket ban is not likely, but far more restrictions, yes, along with possible reductions in tolls on the freeway. So I just wanted to make sure that you understood that I really empathise with the issue here. It is a massive, what you call impact, as they say, and I understand completely. So very much listening, and thank you for all your submissions.
Thank you, Councillor Guest. I think that's an indication that you'll be voting in support of the motion that's before us this evening. Good to hear. Any other councillors? Councillor Andrew Rouse.
If I may, Lord Mayor, just a question first to yourself and then to management in relation to I forget if it's an amendment or if it's an alternative, but in relation to 10.4, there were states yourself will be writing to the Minister for Roads in support of additional mitigation measures to minimise the impact of heavy vehicle movements on roads within the municipality. In your opinion, would an additional mitigation measure be something along the lines of advocating for a toll removal for a period of time to ensure that behaviour change, which is the key to this problem here, would that be something that you would consider an additional mitigation measure?
So look, a suggestion of the removal of tolls altogether on the road, or some form of that, is an interesting proposal. It's something I guess I would want to seek advice on before community, because it's something that comes with very, very significant financial consequences. So I've got an open mind on it, but it's not included in this motion.
That's all right. That's why there's a follow-up question there to management. If you could comment on what we could expect if we were of a mind to advocate to state government, noting, of course, that the tolls on the toll road are a matter for state government and Transurban, what we could expect, or any issues or concerns that we might not be aware of.
Thank you for the question, Councillor Rouse, and through you, Lord Mayor. I think you were correct in indicating that it would be a significant cost consideration for the state and for Transurban, given that there'd be a contractual arrangement between them for managing and running the Westgate Tunnel. I suspect from a management perspective, we see there's greater merit in looking for the truck bans on our local roads the roads we have control over, and we feel that might be the most prudent and appropriate approach.
Thank you. Did you wish to speak to the substantive motion, Councillor Rouse?
Oh, very briefly. In terms of establishing a quantum for that, looking at the current numbers, there's about 4,000 trucks a day at $50 a pop. So I'd assume about 200 grand a day would be the foregone income in terms of a realms of possibility, $1 million a week, where that sits within the current budget circumstances. At a state level, I am not clear. A big thank you to everyone who has come and engaged. I think this is a great example of community getting engaged for a better outcome for their suburb. And certainly if you haven't seen this in play, go and have a coffee at Local Folk, sit out the front there and experience it firsthand as the trucks go rumbling by. Tony, you showed us some photos of the windowsill there, and I won't speak to all the other things that my councillor colleagues have mentioned, but one thing that wasn't mentioned is at the moment the Smart City team are introducing air quality sensors across the entirety of the city of Melbourne. So if there's any area hotspots that you think are in urgent need of that, please jump on the Participate Melbourne website and identify those so our officers can get the appropriate sensors in the appropriate places, and that way we can be having these conversations with data from an informed point of view. So thank you very much for your engagement in this.
Thank you for that, Councillor Rouse. Any other councillors wish to speak to this item? I don't need a right of reply, so let's put it to the vote, everybody. All those in favour of the alternative motion, please raise your hands. Delighted to call that carried unanimously. All right, we move on to our next item of business, agenda item 6.3, Retrofit Melbourne Financial Incentives Scheme. Councillor Griffiths or Ball, would you like a presentation in relation to this item? I'm going to take that as a no. So in that case, we don't have any submitters. I will call on a councillor to move a motion, and I believe we don't have a mover or a seconder for this motion. We have an alternative motion coming. Let's see if we can bring that up, please. Before this motion is moved or seconded, could I just suggest that clause 9.4, request that the Lord Mayor writes to the relevant federal ministers. Could that say federal and state ministers? So things like property tax, for example, or land tax could be one example of something that could be used there. Okay. Is there a mover or a seconder for this? Councillor David Griffiths, are you our mover? Thank you. Looking for a seconder. Thank you, Councillor Olivia Ball. Back to you, Councillor Griffiths.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Very, very happy to be moving this motion tonight. And what it does is effectively have an $800,000 investment for us in our Retrofit Melbourne Financial Initiative Scheme, which is going to be a really important stage in our attempts to make sure that not only does Melbourne have the best quality office space and commercial buildings, but also that they are as environmentally friendly as possible, because we know that that's something that is both good for the environment, good for us as a community, but also really important in the considerations of business when they're deciding where they're going to base themselves. I want to thank officers for all of the work that they've put into this work. It's been extended over the last council and now into the current council, and of course underpinned by our council plan for the 4 years going forward that allow us to start to put together a plan like this, which will take place over the following 3 years. So $800,000 of investment overall, but noting that in the first year, what we'll be doing is going out and having some energy performance benchmarking, going out there and working with building owners to make sure that they have an understanding of the state that their buildings are in, moving then over into development of action plans. So when the benchmarking has established what best case scenarios are, the action plans can flow from there. And then the third tranche of money and the final group will be for the implementation of some of those energy saving improvements that we are finding through those first two stages of the process, and recognising how important that is, particularly in the context of 60% of the emissions in the municipality come from buildings. And so addressing this, as I say, is a really important environmental measure, which is why as head of that portfolio, I'm very happy to be moving this motion, but really understanding as well that it encourages best practice and supports our business community and our building owners. I think there's so many winners out of this motion. It's fantastic to see it going ahead. Thank you again to officers for the work that's gone into it.
Thank you, Councillor Griffiths. Over to you, Councillor Ball.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Griffiths. We know that we need to electrify everything as fast as possible. And 60% of our emissions come from buildings, and building owners are just not retrofitting fast enough. So when the market is failing to achieve this essential transition, that is when there is a beneficial role for government to step in and accelerate climate mitigation. And retrofitting is about climate adaptation too, because a well-insulated and double-glazed building is more comfortable, more leasable, as well as needing less power to operate. So this is a win-win-win initiative. We will all benefit, obviously, whether we own or occupy a building in the city or not, as we all benefit as we drive emissions down and reduce the disastrous consequences of the climate crisis. So thank you to all of our officers for this scheme. I hope it is a huge success with immediate take-up. Thank you for the careful work that's gone into consulting with the stakeholders to design the scheme. Especially want a shout out to Libby Phillips and Maria Panagiotidou for their work. And I'm very happy to second this and hope it goes very well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Ball. Councillor Raphael Camillo.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I'm very pleased to support the motion on the screen before us. Once again, we're seeing local government step up to address a challenge that would be benefit from stronger support from other levels of government. The reality is that Melbourne CBD is changing. We have older office buildings facing high vacancy rates and rising operational costs. At the same time, those buildings represent a tremendous opportunity if we can help them modernize, improve their performance, and remain competitive. Is that maybe postcode 3092 again? I hope yes, because I think it was a successful thing that happened in your city, and I, as a resident of the CBG, I benefit from that nearly more than 30 years ago. Rather than waiting for others to act, the City of Melbourne is once again showing leadership, taking practical steps to support investment, future-proof or building stock, and demonstrate the role a capital city should play in shaping both its economy and its building environment. This is about more than sustainability. This is about economic activation. This is about helping older buildings remain competitive, attracting investment, support jobs, and creating the conditions for a more vibrant CBD. Bring more people, more activity, more life, more residents to our city. The City of Melbourne has a long history of leading on big city issues, and this is another example of council acting in the interest of both Melbourne and the Victorian economy. I'm happy that this motion before us this evening also addresses City of Melbourne advocating to federal and state government to seek target tax and regulatory reforms that urgently we are asking for the best of the economy of the state. I would like to thank the Property Council, Australian Victoria Division for their advocacy work that they are already doing this topic, and of course our officers for their work on this important initiative. Back to you, Lord Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Camillo. Would any of the councillors like to speak? Councillor Owen Guest.
Thank you. Look, I'd actually have to say I'm going to speak against this motion. Whilst I can see there is some good intent there, it is an example, though, of the cost burden being shifted from the property developer to the ratepayer. $800,000 today. How much will this be in the future? I don't know the answer to that, but this does seem like an open-ended fund. Poor old ratepayer here is being asked to meet the burden once again. They couldn't have a rates freeze. Can't always see how we're spending our money, and now we're being asked to subsidise property developers on an environmental basis. For me, I don't see that as being a win-win-win. There's a clear loser to this motion. So, yeah, I'm sorry, but I'm against the motion. And I do apologise for not being able to pad out my words for a few more minutes like other people.
Thank you, Councillor Guest. Any other speakers to this item? Councillor Philip Leilou.
So I think one of the interesting things I've been asking, I think management and council's been looking at. So while we asking the state and federal to look at financial and tax, which is I've always been saying big on that, but there are things we could do ourselves. So carbon credits. We plant so much trees. We do so much in this space that so right now. Carbon credit is trading in Australia is trading at $38 a tonne. Now, I look back upon all the things we have done in terms of, I think so, how many trees we just planted? Like the 3,000, yeah. I'm pretty sure it's pretty easy for us to actually just do a number thing. Now, I've been pushing this internally, I guess, to say, look, why aren't we doing carbon credits? Given that we are probably one of the most trusted groups and everything. So I would hope that while we ask others to actually do it, we also take the initiatives and then maybe, hey, you know what, we actually do have a look at it ourselves and actually go, why don't we do some carbon credit? I don't think any other local council is actually looking at it. And guess what? We can actually create something from nothing, right? We've already got this already done. It's not that hard to apply to, I think it was the ACCU, where you can literally just register and say, this is what we're doing. And if we are actually doing a collection of retrofit buildings, they have to report to us and they would actually work with us to actually generate, to have that certification or legitimacy. So I would say, why don't we start looking at carbon credits? Why don't we be smart about it, be innovative about it, and actually do something about it?
Thank you very much, Councillor Philip Leilou. Any other councillors on this? I'll speak to it briefly and I'll begin the same as others in thanking our very talented team for the policy thinking that has gone into this program. $800,000 investment is not huge, but I think it's been very well targeted, and I think this program is very well designed to try and leverage maximum results for us across the city. And I think we will learn a lot from this Retrofit Melbourne financial incentive scheme as well, which can inform future policy making at the City of Melbourne, which I am really excited about. I would point out that developers do pay quite a lot of revenue to the City of Melbourne in the form of construction fees, many other permit fees that they pay. And of course, many landlords of commercial buildings are also ratepayers in the City of Melbourne. So there is a strong logic to the City of Melbourne wanting to provide financial support to landlords and developers for taking on these sorts of projects. It's a sort of fair return, you might say, that promotes, importantly, positive action around climate, which is what we want to try and drive here at the City of Melbourne. I will also say that Australia leads the world in terms of making improvements at a household level to improve climate outcomes. We lead the world in the installation of rooftop solar. More than 30% of Australian homes have rooftop solar, and now you're seeing batteries being deployed at a rate of 50,000 a year. It's quite extraordinary, and that is going to create a more robust, resilient energy grid, which is going to deliver fantastic outcomes for Australia when it comes to lowering our emissions. We also lead the world in insulation as well at a household level, where we haven't been performing perhaps as well as we should is at that office and commercial level. And so a scheme like this one is a really important opportunity to shift thinking and turn the dial around office and commercial. I also thank councillors for supporting, I hope, in a few short moments, the request that we write to the Victorian State Minister to seek approval and gazettal for the Melbourne Planning Scheme Amendment C376. This will introduce new sustainable building standards in our municipality, a critical part of our climate action plan, and an area where as I've just mentioned, Australia tends to lag other jurisdictions. So C376 has been sitting on the Minister's desk for years. It would be good to see that ticked off and out there so that we can start taking action. This motion requests that letters be written to the federal and state ministers seeking targeted tax and regulatory reforms to accelerate commercial retrofits and adaptive reuse. I make the point again, Australia leads the world in terms of things like rooftop solar at a household level and insulation installation. We need to do better at a commercial property level, and at the City of Melbourne we would love to partner with the state and federal governments to look at what sort of interesting policies could be put in place. We could partner with them on to drive the sort of changes we see at the household level, at a commercial level as well. So with all those things considered, I do hope this will meet with councillors' support. Are there any other speakers? Any right of reply? Councillor David Griffiths.
Thanks, Lord Mayor. I will take the right of reply in this particular instance. I don't normally, but just to rebut some of the points that Councillor Guest was making earlier on about the financing of this, and I think it's important to make the point that I wouldn't be moving this motion. I don't think this motion would have the support of my fellow councillors, and for that matter, I don't think that our officers would put up a motion that hadn't considered the financial aspects of the scheme that's being proposed. It's not an open-ended scheme. It's an $800,000 scheme. I'm going to read the sections from the report that we have in front of us, particularly for the benefit of people who might be watching at home and who don't get to see that we have this information, but I want to make the point that we wouldn't make a decision like this without those budget considerations. So Clause 28 says, implementation of the proposed 3-year retrofit Melbourne financial incentive scheme is subject to budget approval through the annual plan and budget processes for financial years 26, 27, 27, 28, 28, 29. Clause 29, proposed resourcing requirements for the delivery of the 3-year pilot financial incentive program are provided below. Year 1 is included in the Council's endorsed 26-27 budget that we passed recently. Years 2 and 3 will be considered as part of the annual plan and budget process for the respective years, and there's then a table which outlines the operating, labour and costs of the refunds for incentivised activities. This seems to me to be a very coherent, well thought out $800,000 program, and I hope it will pass.
Thank you, Councillor Griffiths. We'll now put the matter to the vote. All those in favour, please raise your hand. Councillor Griffiths, Councillor Scott, Councillor Liu, Councillor Louis, Councillor Rees, Councillor Leilu, Councillor Ball, Councillor Rouse, Councillor Camillo. All those against, Councillor Guest, that motion has passed. We move on, as we always do. Next agenda item, general business. There are no items for general business. Agenda item 8, urgent business. I don't believe there is any urgent business before us this evening. So we move to agenda item 9, public questions. Another 15-minute period will now be provided for public questions. And there are some we didn't get to earlier. Let's start with Ryan Angus's written question to us. And I will now read out a written question as the infrastructure portfolio lead. This written question was received by Ryan Angus. He writes, can Council please explain why a significant share of the Transport Amenity Program, TAP, funding is being allocated to the Transforming Franklin Street initiative? The purpose of the TAP funding is to fund upgrades to manage traffic changes and maximise the benefits of the Westgate Tunnel project in North and West Melbourne. Transforming Franklin Street directly benefits the CBD and is part of the QV Market Precinct Renewal Plan. How this project relates to directly supporting North and West Melbourne is unclear. This appears to be using TAP as a convenient funding source in an entirely different postcode, to the detriment of real opportunities to offset negative outcomes of the Westgate Tunnel project on the North and West Melbourne. Apart from some greening, speed limit changes and analyses of traffic, why is North and West Melbourne being shortchanged tens of millions of dollars? All right. Well, as the portfolio lead, I will now respond to that question, relying on officer guidance. So the rationale for Franklin Street being included in the TAP program is as follows. The TAP, a joint $30.5 million initiative, co-funded 50-50 by the City of Melbourne and the Department of Transport and Planning, included the Transforming Franklin Street project for several strategic urban and transport reasons. One was it was a key connection between major precincts. Second, it was improving pedestrian and cyclist safety and connectivity. Third, managing traffic shifts and urban amenity. Fourth, flood mitigation and storm water management. And fifthly, strategic alignment with council plans. My understanding is that a decision was made by senior transport and transport officials and City of Melbourne officials that this project met the criteria for the TAP, and that was a decision made some years ago, certainly before this council term. I would say more broadly that I am frustrated, indeed I am extremely frustrated, that getting the TAP funding out the door is taking so long. We are seeing progress now on Hawke Street. We are seeing progress on speed limits. I believe we will see further progress for road changes off the vote we've had here this evening. But we need to see more. We need to see much more. And so we will keep working diligently with the Victorian government. We've done studies. We've collected the data. It's really time to crack on and deliver for the communities who require and need funding from the TAP program to improve their amenity post the opening of the Westgate Tunnel. Rick, did you wish to add anything to that, or Karen or anyone from our infrastructure team? Nods of the head, okay. Shaking of the head, I should say. Okay, well, that is that one. We move on to our next question. That comes from...
Sorry, Lord Mayor.
Yes.
Owing to the fact we've got people in the audience, can we check if there's any questions here? And therefore, if we have written questions and we don't get to them in the 15 minutes, we might have them appended to the minutes, given there are people here who might have a question.
Brilliant suggestion. Brilliant suggestion, Councillor Andrew Rouse. Is there anybody here this evening who has any questions? Aaron Moon, make your way to the lectern. And I apologise for subjecting you to that previous question.
No, that's right. I like that question anyway. So, thank you, Lord Mayor. So my question is, 2 weeks ago, Melbourne got a questionable new artwork on the Balti Bridge. Following this, Lord Mayor, you went on ABC Radio 774 and said, we will be cleaning this up and it will cost a ballpark of $30,000 to $50,000, which will likely be ratepayer and road users footing the bill. You also mentioned that last year the City of Melbourne spent $2 million on graffiti removal, and that's the cost of a childcare centre. But this budget we've just adopted, you've adopted for $34.3 million for graffiti removal. So have we missed out on 17 childcare centres this year? And then so my additional question is, why would the City of Melbourne ratepayers pay for the cleanup on a site that is not City of Melbourne, where City of Melbourne is not the responsible authority? And then if City of Melbourne has input into the cleaning of the Balti Bridge, would there be a consideration to instead paint the grey pylons with a mural artwork akin to my budget submission?
Thank you very much, Aaron, for that question. Do you want to take this question, Councillor Camillo, or do you want me to respond?
We're not paying for the boat bridge. I think you've got to confuse the information because it's definitely state government, and I will check with the managers.
It's just a direct quote from the radio. That's
okay. Lord Mayor, would you like to clarify that?
Yeah, look, why don't I provide clarification on the point? So, I mean, look, we talk about the Balti Bridge artwork. I don't know the words FU. I don't think that's necessarily artwork. That's an offensive slur that appears on that column. And the suggestion that that could be left there as a welcome to our city is beyond
I think what Aaron's asking, when you said we're cleaning it, is that yes or no?
So I think
Did you say it or not?
So thank you, Councillor Leilu. So that's the first point on the artwork. Second question in regards to remarks I made about the cleanup, I think that was in the context of the broader cleanup across Melbourne and to tagging and graffiti. And the point is that ultimately somebody does pay, whether that's ratepayers or in the case of the Balti Bridge, I actually believe it'll be Transurban who is responsible for the current owners and operators of the Balti Bridge. It will transfer back to the state at the end of the franchise, but currently the owner and the operator of the bridge is Transurban, and so it'll be Transurban who will ultimately pay for, will pay for the removal of that vandalism. But who ultimately pays will be motorists, because they'll pay that in the form of higher tolls on the road, because Transurban charges tolls as part of its business, and they'll be charging tolls to recover the costs for these sort of maintenance works. So that's what I was referring to there broadly.
Point of clarification, if I may. Were you suggesting that we leave the graffiti up there, or are you suggesting that we take the existing grey poles and get an appropriate artist to cover that in a mural, such as I presume we would all love to see more art across the city?
Yeah, like my preferred option would be to, I've seen a lot of art from businesses advertising their business on the second pole, but have something that reflects the community, like that grey pole. I guess I don't like the artwork either. Like, I share everyone's sentiment. Why would you want that artwork? But I like the idea of the artwork, being in that spot, or kind of like the imagination of that artwork. Why isn't there artwork there? It's a blank canvas.
But your suggestion was for more murals across the city of Melbourne, not.
That's right.
Not to leave it.
Like my submission to the budget was painting all the grey pylons with mural artwork, like in Moonee Valley, and this is just an extension of those pylons, essentially.
And that was an excellent suggestion, and I believe it is under consideration.
So if that quote was correct and Councillor Camillo is correct, then your statement was incorrect, that the ratepayers are not paying for this. We is an ambiguous term. When you say we are paying, we as a society are paying, we as motorists are paying, but council is not paying. Is that correct?
No, I believe I was correct, Councillor Ball, and I was making those comments in the context of asking about graffiti across the city, which included the Bolte Bridge, but I was speaking more broadly about the
Council
graffiti.
is not cleaning that particular...
No.
No.
No, Transurban is.
Thank you.
That's my, yeah.
All right. Thank you for your
anything
question.
about the, did you have a comment on the, you said in that interview that's a childcare centre for $2 million last year. So this year we're paying $36 million, which is the equivalent, if you take your numbers, to 17 childcare centres. Was there a comment?
So the $34 million, I think it is, might be 36, is our broader cleaning budget. The $2 million is specifically for tagging, graffiti removal, of which we remove something like 150,000 square metres of the muck across the city for last year.
Okay.
Are there any other questions? Honorary Councillor Chris Thrum, I can see you waving your arms there. Please make your way to the lectern.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Coming up, we've got from Saturday, I believe. No, it's Friday. We've got Melbourne Rare Book Week from the 24th of July to the 1st of August, and the City of Melbourne is a proud sponsor and participant of it, with some of our libraries participating as well. For example, we've got a tremendous author, Georgina Chatterton, who's got a session at the City Library on Friday the 31st of July from 4 to 5 p.m, celebrating her book, Oh Brother, Telling Real Stories Through Graphic Novels. Can you have someone encourage the citizens of Melbourne to participate in Melbourne Rare Book Week, considering that Melbourne is a UNESCO City of Literature, and it's appropriate that all the citizens around Melbourne come into the CBD and celebrate Melbourne Rare Book Week?
Thank you, Chris Thrum. Councillor Philip Leilu, did you want to guide us in response to this item?
Sure, I think more than happy to. I walk past Collins Street. What's the other one? Antiquarian. Yeah, I was going to, and all myself and anything. I'm sure we can't force everyone, but definitely we will try to do promote more and see what we can do.
Sure,
All right, First, Councillor David Griffiths.
With a little bit of indulgence from my fellow councillors, just following up from what I was saying earlier on in my discussion on the Kensington trucks, it was fantastic to see the Flemington and Kensington Bowling Club being the hub this weekend for the first ever Flemington Kensington Writers Festival, where we gathered a huge number of local authors and finished that off, Chris, I think you'll be interested to know, with a collaboration between the Melbourne Blues Appreciation Society and a whole lot of local writers. It was a really classic example of that community coming together and exploring creatively a whole lot of issues that are important to them. That's good news. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much, Chris, and thank you, Councillor Leilu and Councillor Griffiths, for those responses. If there aren't any further questions from those in attendance, we have one written final question to give mercy to everyone here. We might just take that question on notice and provide a written response. I can see some officers grimacing at that, but for the good of all of us, I think we will conclude our public questions session, and that only leaves one agenda item, and that would be our final agenda item. And it is agenda item 10, closure of the open meeting, I wish to thank members of the public for their interest and attendance and declare this meeting closed at 8:16 p.m.